Yep. Just so you know, if my channel disappears in the blink of an eye, it might be because of this particular class. Because I'm the type of person to be so hard-headed that I'm not going to be breaking any of YouTube's rules in this particular class. But we all know how that goes. We all know how that goes. So anywho, if my channel disappears from the YouTube-verse, it's all because I tried to explain a little bit about hacking. And everybody knows YouTube can't create a moderation bot save their darn life. And so my channel may disappear. How dare you, Eli, try to provide free to the end user technology education? That shows what a satanic Nazi you really are. Anyway, I don't try to get into this stuff in these particular class videos. I think of this kind of snarkiness as something that is from my past. But every once in a while, it actually is topical. Every once in a while, sometimes snark is the only appropriate solution. So anywho, this is going to be a class on hacking and introducing. I messed up on the keynote presentation. Anyways, it's a hacking introduction class. So I thought this was a good class to do here at Silicon Dojo to basically give people an idea of what hacking actually is so that they can understand what the danger is and try to come up with appropriate remedies for the issues that people are going to be running into. One of the big issues that we have now is everybody's excited about remote work, right? Remote work is awesome! Yeah, for everybody other than the IT professionals that have to deal with your infrastructure. Hacking has been a big thing for decades at this point. None of this is particularly new, but the threat vectors nowadays is something that is actually new. When you have 90% of your employees working within a physical office space, simply provides fundamentally many forms of security and protection, right? The issue is once you start having 90% of your workforce being remote with only 10% being in the office, now all of a sudden there's a whole bunch of new hacking issues that come up because now every single person that is now working remotely, that is now a vector for attack to go after your internal corporate infrastructure. And let's just say I'm really happy I'm not a corporate IT person right now. Some people are like, well, Eli, if you're so smart, why aren't you working in the corporate world then? It's like, because I like to sleep at night. You know, I can't remember the last time I got woken up at midnight because some server crashed. It's great. I do this video, I go home, I walk the dog, I have a couple of beers, I go to bed. Doesn't really matter what happens in the technology world. I want to get a good old night's sleep. Then I'm going to wake up in the morning and create another class. So anyways, I want to talk about this whole hacking thing because this is becoming more and more relevant in the IT world. Now again, when I do these videos, these are basically like the director's cut of the classes that I've done. So last night I actually did this class in the real world. A couple of notes that I will give you if you plan to do a class like this is one of the things that was interesting, not exactly a surprise, is that my attendance for this particular class was better than normal. So if you're going to be doing a class on something like Introduction to Hacking, it's weird to say, it's going to get a lot of interest in attendance to your class. I'm not snarking here. I'm not snarking. I'm just putting this out there just so everybody understands. One of the things that I did find interesting though is even though this was a pretty decent sized class that was willing to come here, at one point during the presentation, a whole bunch of people were looking down at their smartphones, doing smartphone stuff. And it's kind of interesting. So I've been doing these Silicon Dojo classes. So this must be my 10th or 11th one at this point. And I do not believe in any of the other ones that I've done up until this point. I have looked out and seen people engrossed in their smartphones. So I don't know if it's a subject matter, I don't know if it's a presenter, I don't know if it's the class or whatever else, but if you're going to do an introduction to hacking class, you may want to take my slides off of silicondojo.com and modify them a little bit to put a little bit more whiz-bang in there. Because people like whiz-bang, people like things that blink and scream and fans that turn on and all that kind of stuff. So again, just one of those random things that I noticed actually doing these types of classes. So something to keep in mind if you plan to do one of these classes yourself, if you're going to be creating your own Silicon Dojo. Now the first slide here, I put this slide in, obviously before I did the presentation, and I was very happy that I put this slide in before the presentation, because it ended a lot of, you can't call them stupid conversations. If you say it's stupid conversations, then people get insulted. Let's just say this prevents a lot of conversations that I do not want to have. One of the big issues that we're dealing with right now in the world, not just in the technology world, in the world, is everybody has opinions about everything, and they want to say their opinions about everything. And one of the issues in the technology world is it's a hell of a lot easier to get into an argument about philosophies or laws or things like that versus actually trying to solve said problems, right? I care about solving said problems. How can we use biometrics in the real world? Again, how can we provide gatekeeperless, authorityless, free to the end user education to people? This is the stuff that I care about. I don't care about that side. I don't care about that side. I don't want to get into it. So I just put this slide in here. I may put this slide into every single presentation that I do. Warning, trigger warning, I don't care that much. So I'm going to be talking about a lot of stuff today. I'm going to be talking about everything from GPS spoofing to normal spoofing and sniffing and all that kind of stuff. I'm going to talk about sniffing in the corporate environment. The sniffing that will not get a sexual harassment lawsuit going after you. Anyways, I'm going to talk about all this stuff. Here's the thing. I'm just going to say that it exists. This is stuff that exists. I do not care what your opinion is about it. I don't really care what my opinion is about it. This exists. Do with it what you will. Again, I will say this is an interesting thing, this being my 11th class that I've done for Silicon Dojo, plus going to many tech meetups, in the post-COVID world. And yeah, there's a lot of conversations out there I just don't want to get into anymore. Oh, it gets very weird very fast. And so again, when I talk about sniffing, one of the things I want to talk about is I once actually interviewed a manager for a company, and they provide network sniffing equipment for companies to do longitudinal research or whatever. Basically, it can store everything that goes over the network, literally everything that goes over the network for weeks at a time, with the idea being that if there is an attack or if there's a penetration or if there's a problem, they can see the specific moment that happened, and then they can see on the network everything that worked up to that. So let's say a server gets infected, so they know the time that a server gets infected. They could then go back and they could see, okay, right before the server was infected, this user connected to that server, right? And when the user connected to the server, this file was transferred over the network. Well, how did that file get onto that person's computer? And they can go through and they can see everything that you've done on the network. Again, I find that interesting from a technology standpoint. Do I care about the other arguments about this? No, I don't. So anyways, if you're going to be doing these dojo type classes, I would recommend you come up with a slide that looks at something like this, because last night when we were having these discussions about a whole bunch of different things, certain people would pipe up with their opinions, and I would just say, I don't care, move on. Anyways, one of those things. Warning, this is not a security class. So again, a lot of times when you're talking about hacking or something, there's this whole push for the cybersecurity angle. For this particular class, we're just going to be focusing on the tools and the tricks and the kinds of things that are done in the hacking world, and we will actually have a cybersecurity class in the future. So if I talk about sniffing or spoofing or any of the many things I'm going to be talking about today, and you're like, okay, but what's the counter to that? It's like, well, Well, come to the cybersecurity introduction class and you will find out. So here's a good thing. Again, when we start talking about words have meaning. So a lot of people like to throw words around without actually thinking about what the meaning of the word is. So when we talk about hacking, a lot of people have an idea in their head about what hacking is, but they don't really put it into words, and so it can get really confusing when you're talking about hacking. Basically, the way that I define hacking is simply interacting with systems in ways they were not designed, right? So computers, systems, they are designed to be worked with in certain ways. A computer, you use a keyboard, a mouse, a modem, a printer, monitor, the whole 9 yards. That's how you're supposed to interact with it. If you interact with a website, you are supposed to go through the specific forms, so on and so forth. All hacking is basically interacting with a system in a way it was not designed to be interacted with. So if I have a client's computer and the computer fries itself, so I can no longer use a keyboard and mouse to get into it, I can pull the hard drive out, shove that into another computer, recover all of the data off of that particular hard drive, and voila, I have hacked the hard drive. That is a non-traditional way of trying to interact with the data. Sql Injection Attack. This is basically you put what's called a SQL statement into a web form, and basically you can try to interact with the underlying database simply by dumping SQL statements into a web form. Again, this is also a non-traditional way to interact with a web application. Again, one of these is more or less legit than the other, but that's what I think about when we're talking about hacking. All this is, when we're talking about hacking, is you're interacting with systems basically the way that they were not designed. Now the next thing that comes up is the whole hat thing. Eli, what hat am I? I feel like sometimes when I talk to young people, talk about hacking or whatever, they think they're going to like that Harry Potter school, Hogwarts or whatever. Put on the hat and tell me what I am. Am I a black hat, a white hat, a gray hat? And as I would say, kids love hats. Kids love hats. Hats are for Harry Potter. I don't really think they're that useful in the real technology world. Back in the old days, I don't know, if you go back 20 years ago, when you talk about black hat, white hat, and gray hat, this might have made a darn bit of sense back then. The idea is black hat. They're the evil hats. I wonder how that's going to work with social justice. Not gonna be able to call it black hat anyway, so I gotta go in there. Anyway, so black hat was the evil hat, right? These are the people that hack for bad, right? That was the idea. White hats. Anyways. Oh, we're in a screwed up world right now. I don't care, doesn't matter. Anyway, white hat. White hat is the good and the noble hat. There are things like penetration testers. They hack for good. And then the gray hat. The idea of the gray hat is, well, generally they're white hats, but sometimes if you really want to be good, you also gotta do bad. And so you're a gray hat. And as I say, that sounds awesome to 14-year-olds. 14-year-olds think that sounds so cool! The problem is, in the real technology world, none of that makes a darn bit of sense. So, when I think about the people who actually do hacking in the real world, I would put it down into these categorizations. So the first type of people that do hacking are administrators. So basically like what I was when I had the consulting company, when I worked in the technology world, or when I worked in the corporate world, the whole 9 yards. Basically, again, you have a computer, the motherboard fails, you need to recover all of the data off of that computer, so you pull the hard drive out, you put it in some recovery devices, you extract the data in a non-traditional way. That is a way of hacking. Basically cracking passwords. Actually, as an administrator back in the day, I had to crack a lot of passwords. Can't overestimate how stupid many users are. Anyways, but it's true. A lot of people, they would put passwords on their systems, they would forget the passwords on their systems, and so they owned the system. They were legally entitled to do whatever the hell they wanted to do with the system. They just forgot their darn password. So we would use Jack the Ripper or whatever password software that we use at the time to go in and crack any number of passwords, whether it was the actual operating system password or anything else. Getting by BIOS passwords. So BIOS passwords used to be a big deal. Actually put a password on the motherboard itself, and then you have people forget their BIOS password. Oh, sometimes that worked out well. That ended in a lot of tears. I had a client of mine. It was so sad because she had learned about what a BIOS password was. And so when I was working on her computer, she was like, I want a BIOS password. And I was like, no, you don't. I guarantee you, you do not want a BIOS password. I'm paying you. Fine, ma'am. Yes, ma'am. I put a BIOS password on her computer. About 90 days later, I then got a call because she forgot what her BIOS password was. And then I said, hey, remember when I told you that was a bad idea? Anywho, she got a brick. So anyways, again, as administrators back in the day, we had like Outlook. So Outlook was how we dealt with email. We had PST files. PST files stored all of the email information, all the emails it would get in a PST file. So you'd have to hack the PST files, that type of thing. Again, if you are actually in legal control of your network and you want to sniff the entire network and be able to grab everything that goes on in the network, that is a form of hacking. But again, you are simply an administrator. You are interacting with systems in a non-traditional way, because you're actually trying to get your job done. The next set of hackers, you'll hear about these a lot, especially in the modern world, with makers and all that kind of stuff, are modders. So what modders are is they take a device. So let's say a PlayStation, let's say some stupid little Sony robot or whatever else. They take that particular device, they try to figure out how to make it do new things that it wouldn't do before, and they basically hack it. So back in the old days, you could get like a PlayStation 3 to be able to run Linux. One of the things I'll talk about is Sony has a stupid ass robotic dog that people in Japan like way too much. And so there are hackers out there that are manipulating these little robotic dogs. Again, these people are not bad at all, except from the corporate perspective, since they're violating copyright many times. They're just hacking around with systems, trying to make systems do different things. Then there are the penetration testers, right? What everybody in the world wants to apparently be at this point in time. Penetration testers are the people. They're kind of like a divergent, a specialization of the administrators. Basically, what their job is try to penetrate the systems of the corporation or the organization that they've been contracted by or work for to verify that there are not holes that are easily fixed. Again, to make sure that web forms do not allow for Sql Injection Attacks, to make sure that there are passwords on the Wi-Fi, all of that kind of thing. So you have the penetration testers. Past that, you then have the criminals. Again, these are the folks most people think about when they think about hackers right now. These are the folks that go out there and they're basically using hacking in order to make money from illicit purposes. They infect companies' servers with ransomware, basically encrypts all the data on the server. If you don't give us Bitcoin, we will not give you the decryption key. That's something that criminals do. One of the really bastard things that criminals do is they use something called RATs, remote administration tools. They infect young women's computers with these remote administration tools. They turn on the webcam, and then they take pictures of these women in compromising situations, since they have these laptops in their bedrooms, and then they send the women pictures and say, if you do not pay us in Bitcoin, we're going to post this on Facebook or whatever else, right? You got the criminals out there, wire fraud and everything else. The final group of people, and this is where I would argue 99.99999% of most hackers reside, are the assholes. This is one of the big problems we deal with in the technology world right now, is that basically there are a lot of issues with our infrastructure. There are a lot of issues with our systems. Again, do remember TCP/IP, the networking protocol suite that we use in order to communicate on the internet, that was based off of trusted environments. Military bases communicating with other military bases, universities communicating with other universities, government organizations communicating with other government organizations. The idea is you had known good servers or host devices or whatever else, and these known good are communicating with each other. So there's just a lot of issues in the protocol. There's a lot of fundamental issues with the technology that we use, simply because it was designed back in the 1970s. And we're still using it today. Again, we don't drive the same cars that we were driving back in the 1970s for a reason. Anyways, most of the technology that we use is still based off of that 1970 stuff. So you have the a-holes out there, and they want to prove how cool and awesome they are in the modern world, and they just go out there and they deface things and they vandalize things and whatever else. I think about it like when I was young, martial arts was the big thing. So my friends and I would go out there and we would just beat the snot out of each other. Good old times. Different time period, different time. Anyways, the way that I think about it is there's a lot of young folks out there with just as much angst and frustration as we had back in the day. But, you know, getting hit is not something that they find amusing. And so instead, they go online and they just get their frustrations out online. Again, I've had a real big problem with a-holes, again, running my business, doing the whole Eli the Cuter Guy thing. The entire time I've been doing online video and the whole 9 yards, it's all been good. There have been no schemes. Haven't been any like weird ways that I've been trying to make money. And yet the a-holes that view me many times destroy the things that I try to create. Again, I believe in open, gatekeeperless, authorityless systems. I had 2 communities back in the past that I spun up and I tried to get working, trying to make them open and authorityless and gatekeeperless. Here was the interesting thing. The mafia did not take those communities down. The Chinese hackers did not take those communities down. Literally, people that said, Eli, I'm so thankful for all the knowledge that you've given me over the past couple of years, and the way I'm going to repay you for that is by destroying this thing that you created. You're like, yeah, great. Again, something to be thinking about, again, the real world is, you know, when young people talk about like doing penetration testing or whatever and pretending to be a hacker. Again, I came from the Baltimore area. One of the things I think of is one of my neighbors, they had bars on their window. So they had secured bars on the window frame, right? So they have a window frame and they put bars on the window frame so that they would not get broken into. So one of the locals did very thorough penetration testing on that person's house and kicked in the entire window frame. And then came in and took a couple of things, because, you know, you got to get paid if you're doing penetration testing. And so one of the points that I try to make to a lot of you kids out there is it's not amusing when somebody kicks in your entire window frame and burglarizes from you, nor is it amusing when you have some jackass go out there and start vandalizing crap just because they're angsty and they don't want to actually go out there and get, you know, physical with somebody. So that's the final bit, the a-holes. Don't be an a-hole. Now, if you're going to go out there and you're going to do hacking, you're going to be a white hat hacker, you're going to be cool like that. One of the big things is make sure you get permission from the right people. Make sure if you go out there and you do penetration testing illegally, that you actually get permission to do the penetration testing from people that have the legal right to give you that permission. One of the wonderful examples from 2019, Iowa paid a security firm to break into a courthouse, then arrested employees when they succeeded. Here was an interesting issue. So basically, it was like the state of Iowa was doing an audit of the courthouses. And so they wanted to do a security audit of the courthouses, and so they paid a penetration testing team to go in and try to penetrate the courthouse, try to get in, and see what they could gather. They were given a get out of jail free card by the state, so the idea was, if they are caught at any time, they do not run. They simply stop. They say, yes, sir, I have been hired by, and they're supposed to hand over this paper, and the police are supposed to let them go. Here's the thing, the courthouse that they were trying to get into was not amused. Was not amused. And apparently the people that were running that particular courthouse did not feel that the state of Iowa, or whoever that hired this particular company, had the right to hire a company to do this. So these particular security people, these penetration testers, ended up spending a number of days in jail. Even though they had to get out of jail free card, they were arrested by the actual courthouse, and it turned into a big mess. Again, this is a big thing to be thinking about. If you are an administrator, right, up there at the administrator, the people that I'm really talking to with all these videos, this is something that you need to be thinking about. When you start cracking passwords in the corporate environment, when you start opening up emails in the corporate environment, when you start bypassing security in order to give the boss or whatever it is that they need, do verify. You have the legal right to do that. Again, it's very important. Privacy rules, privacy laws. In the US, they're a little bit here. In other countries, like places in Europe, many European countries, they have a lot more privacy laws. So just because you are a system administrator working on an employee's computer, so this is a computer that is owned by the company, just because you're hacking into that system doesn't necessarily mean you have the legal right to do so. If you want to you have a really bad day, spend 24 hours cracking into an employee's system and then have the employee sue you for doing something that's illegal. So do be careful with this. Again, talk to your lawyer, talk to your company or whatever else. Try to make sure you understand where your legal rights are if you're going to be doing penetration testing. That's the real world right there. One of the interesting things too is hacking can violate copyright. So again, when I was talking about those modders, so there's this weird little Sony dog. So Sony. Oh, this is one of those times when I'm like, well, the United States might be screwed up, but we're not cuddling robotic dogs yet. Anywho, Sony came out with this robotic dog that is apparently a massive hit over in Japan, and lots of people love to have their robotic dogs. So somebody basically was able to figure out a way to actually go and code special things for these, what they're called, the ABOs, these ABO dogs, and a lot of people were very happy and excited about it, right? This was a modder, this was a hacker that figured out a way to interact with the dog, with the system, in a way that Sony had not designed it for. Sony then went after that modder because he was violating their copyright. The Digital Millennium Copyright Act makes it illegal to circumvent technical measures, encryption and copy protection that prevent access to copyrighted materials such as computer software or media content. The DMCA also bans the distribution of products or services that are designed to carry out circumvention of technical measures that prevent either access to or copying of copyrighted materials. So this gets very interesting right now. There's this whole right to repair thing that's going on. I'll be curious to see how that works out at the end of the day. There's a lot of like right to repair advocates. They're like, yay, we're winning. And I'm like, yeah, I don't know, give it a couple years. Let's see how this works out at the end of the day. Basically, the interesting thing here with these little ABO dogs is, right, if you have software that's easy to be read, so essentially, like, let's say an interpreted software, Python or PHP or whatever else, right? You just have the code that's kind of sitting there on the dog, on the device, and you go in there and modify that. That probably, not a lawyer, but that probably would not violate the DMCA. The interesting thing with this, though, is if Sony encrypts the data and the communication that goes on within that dog, right? Basically, same code does the same crap, but because they put encryption on it to try to protect it, if you then break that now becomes a violation of the DMCA. So this is just one of those things to keep in mind and to think about, yada yada. When you are going to be doing hacking, a big thing to realize when you're actually going to go out there in the real world and do hacking is that hacking is going to be a layered attack. One of the big problems we have in the technology world is everybody looks at one thing, one device, one product, and they go, oh, that's it. Right? Kali Linux is hacking. A firewall is security. And it's like, no, that's a component for hacking. If a hacking attack is actually going to be successful, the thing to think about is that there are going to be multiple layers to the hacking attack. The first thing that you're going to do is, we're going to talk about this in a second, is you're going to do social engineering. You're going to go out there, you're going to have conversations with people, you're going to call the company, you're going to get material from the company to understand what's going on. Hey, yeah, I need to talk to the CTO of your company. By the way, what is his name again? Her name, their name? Don't want to piss anybody off. What is their name again? Oh, scribble that down. Okay, where are they located? Right? You write down all of this information, and that starts to give you an idea of what's going on in the company. Then the next thing that you do is you start doing things like phishing attacks. So phishing attacks are when you send out email, basically spoofing the email address, and you say, hey, I am the CTO, right? Because you figured out who the CTO's name is. I'm the CTO, and I need you to log into this particular web portal and to change your credentials. A lot of people do go and they type things. And then past that, you start to figure out exactly who you want to go after. That's a spear phishing attack. So spear phishing attacks is when you go after individual specific people and then you target them. And you keep going, you go in and you go. And that's the thing, is if you have a successful hacking attack, this is going to be a multi-layered attack against a company or organization or a person. It is not going to be simply one thing. It's not simply going to be social engineering. It's not simply going to be a phishing attack. No, it shouldn't. It shouldn't. Some people are stupid. I mean, there are users. Anytime you talk about any of this kind of stuff, then you're like, well, but you are trying to compromise users. Anyways. So the first layer of the hacking attack is going to be social engineering. What social engineering is basically you come in and you pretend to be somebody. You are now an actor. And you go in and you pretend to be something that you are not to see how far you can get with the company. So one of the things I think about, like with social engineering back in the day, so I used to administer something called Definity PBX systems, PBX audit systems from Avaya Definity systems. Anyways, these were telephone systems, so big telephone cabinet, and inside the telephone cabinet there were these cards, and so the cards, kind of like a card that you would put into a PC, only a hell of a lot bigger, they would do things like they would support the different digital telephone lines for the system. They would actually have the service for the auto attendants and the call route and all that kind of thing, and those were on the cards. The thing is with these cards were worth up to $30,000 a piece. One card, 30 grand, right? And so there are these criminals out there that came up with a really cool idea, and it was a big problem. So they would walk into just any random company office, because everybody had telephone systems back in the day, and they said, we are the telephone contractors, and we understand you're having a problem with your telephone system. Can we go and start taking a look to get everybody up to where they should be? And you would have the receptionist be like, oh, I didn't realize there were any problems with our telephone system, but fine. Telephone people are coming to fix our telephone system. All right, they would get up, they would walk the people to wherever the hell the telephone system was, and then they would walk away. Because again, actually doing contract work, one of the things I realize is most employees don't want to know what the hell a computer. It's kind of like employees to computer geeks are kind of like kids to adults as far as sex is concerned. They don't really want to know. They know it happens. They know it happens. They're not going to argue, but they do not want to see it, right? Same thing is true with employees and geeks. Like, they know the servers do something for their company, but they don't really want to know how any of that works, and so they run away just as fast as they can. They're like a little 4-year-old running away from their kids kissing, right? Anyway, so the receptionist or whatever, they leave, and you have these telephone people that are now in the room, and what they would do is they would open up the cabinet and they would just start pulling out $30,000 card. Ooh, this is a $30,000 card. Put it in the bag. Ooh, this is a $25,000 card. Put it in the bag. Ooh, this company's doing really good. That's one of those deluxe $40,000 cards. They would put it into the bag. Now, nobody knew what was going on, right? Because the only person that knew that anybody had come into the telephone room was that receptionist. Receptionist didn't pass this information on to anybody because she didn't think it needed to be. So all of a sudden, the telephone lines start going down, auto attendants start failing, calls start failing, the whole 9 yards, and people are like, what's going on? And basically, these people, they put everything in, they walk out by the receptionist and go, oh, we think we understand what the problem is, so we're going to go out to our truck and find a particular component. We'll be back in just a couple of minutes. They go out to their vehicle, they get in the vehicle, they drive away. Literally, by the time the CEO or the boss knows anything is going on, these people have already gone very far away with $200,000 worth of cards, right? That is kind of the concept when we start talking about social engineering. Again, one of the interesting things about computers nowadays is this is a full-fledged computer. This is a $10 computer. It's a Raspberry Pi 0W, has a full wireless stack on this. So this is a full-fledged computer, right? It has a 1 gigahertz processor, has 512 megs of RAM, and can actually have a hell of a lot of storage on here if you want to. This is also a computer, a bit more powerful. This is actually a Windows 10 high-end professional computer, has like 8 gigs of RAM in it, a whole bunch of other stuff, has a lot of other functionality. These are the sizes of computers nowadays. So if you have a nice little orkin lady that comes in to like an office environment, right? So I'm in an office environment right now. So this environment, basically this building is owned by a company. They then hire a property management company to deal with this property, get my rent, that type of thing. And they also do things such as hire orkin people to come in and put down insecticide or rodenticide or whatever else, right? So I know for a fact, because I've had this in businesses in the past, where I haven't had an orkin person walk up and say, "Hi, I've been hired by the property manager to go through and spray some insecticide or whatever else." Hey, that's what people say. All right. Well, if somebody comes in and they got their little stupid bag or bottle of whatever insecticide and they're looking around, how hard is it for them to drop one of these or drop one of these or drop one of the other devices that we're going to be talking about today into your infrastructure, and all of a sudden you now have something inside the walls of your building connected directly to your infrastructure that is now continuously scanning your network, looking for vulnerabilities, sucking up whatever information that it can find, communicating with the command and control server, the whole 9 yards. So these are some of the things to be thinking about when you think about social engineering. Basically, people pretending to be folks that they're not and going in and, again, trying to see how far they can get. This is the first layer. Again, when we talk about like putting a computer into the infrastructure, right? The social engineering gets you to put the computer into the infrastructure, but you also need to understand how to configure this computer to actually be able to do anything. You need to be able to configure this so it can communicate with the command and control server, the whole 9 yards, right? This is the first layer. The other thing, again, with the social engineering, again, people pretending to be other people, and now especially with spoofing, so I'll talk about spoofing in a moment. You can spoof your telephone number, right? So spoofing your telephone number basically makes it look as if you're calling from a number that you're not. So if you figured out the CTO of a company, and then you figured out what their cell phone number is, and then you spoof their cell phone to call in to the corporate help desk and say, "Hey, I need my password reset." Right? Again, the multiple layers that is going on. One of the greatest things, if you're going to go into hacking, is to realize is people want to trust you. There's a phrase that I say, and one of the reasons that I say it all the time, a couple of times a day, is because I'm trying to bang it into like just a couple people's heads. If I can just get a couple of people to make this their mantra, my life's work will be done. Distrust, verify, stay suspicious. One of the problems that we get to in the real world is everybody wants to be so trusting. It's weird. We're in this whole society where we're told about nobody likes anybody else and nobody trusts anybody else and we're all at war. Here's the funny thing. In the real world, when you're actually trying to get something accomplished, it's amazing how many people just won't trust you. Again, you walk in with a uniform, they don't want to question that uniform. Wait a minute, you're with Orkin? I thought our property company used Rideau rodent or whatever the hell. And nobody does that. You got a uniform on. People don't question uniform. Again, one of the greatest things that I love, again, with a lot of my YouTube viewers, one of the things that I say is I would never trust a free VPN service. Like, trusting a free VPN service seems like the stupidest thing I could possibly ever do, right? Because a VPN service is essentially a man-in-the-middle attack. We will talk about man-in-the-middle attacks in a little bit. But basically, when you connect to a VPN, all of your data coming out of your computer is going through their servers to get to the internet. So if you don't know what's going on with those servers, if there is no way to know if they've been audited or anything else, if there's no way to establish trust with those VPN servers, the reality is you have no idea whether or not they are collecting all of the information that is going through their infrastructure. But what people say, what YouTubers say, what 14-year-olds say who love their hats, they're like, But Eli, I read their policy. Their policy says no logging. Come on now. They say they don't log. And I'm like, great. I can say I'm worth $2 million an hour. So far, nobody has actually tried to pay me that amount of money, right? Just because you say something doesn't necessarily mean it's true. One of the things that I talk about is if I was in charge of the NSA, the first two things that I would spin up is I would spin up the best quality free VPN service that the world has ever seen, and then I would try to spin up the best quality paid for VPN service that the world has ever seen, and then with the paid for VPN service, I would then start insulting the free VPN service and basically saying only people that are hipsters or whatever else use a free VPN service. And then you know what I would do? Then I would log everything that goes through both VPN services. All while I have a nice privacy policy that states we do not log anything. Because remember, just because somebody puts something in writing does not mean that's what the configuration files look like. And if it cannot be audited, if you cannot verify that what they are stating is true, it should be assumed that it is not true. And so this is something to think about. Again, if you are going to create a company to do some kind of weird hacking, so let's say you want to come up with an app. This is really cool, right? Third-party apps. So third-party apps connect into your Gmail account, they connect into your Facebook account, they connect into your Twitter account, they connect into all these kinds of accounts, right? So one of the things that I would posit is if I wanted to get a lot of high value information, I would create a very inexpensive CRM app, right? Customer Relationship Management app. So Salesforce is amazing, costs about $50 per user per month. So a lot of people think that's pretty expensive, and it actually goes up quite a bit from there. So that's ridiculous. Ridiculous. Salesforce is ripping you off. They're trying to sell you $50 per month. We're going to give you the same value for $3 per month. Only a moron want to take that. Oh, what? You're going to get ripped off by Salesforce? You that type of person? Look. Oh, and don't worry about the privacy. We have this amazing privacy policy here. We tell you exactly what we do and that we don't do with all of your information, the whole 9 yards. But do remember, when you connect that third-party app to Gmail, to Facebook, to Twitter, to whatever the hell else you're connecting to, most of the time, it wants full rights to whatever account you're connecting it to. Again, like with a CRM solution, it wants the ability to send emails. It wants the ability to delete emails. It wants the ability to scan your entire contact database. It wants the ability to understand all the relationships that what you have with everybody. And here's the thing, they can write whatever privacy policy they want. At the exact same time, they're dumping all of that crap into a back-end database and doing whatever correlations or whatever else they want on their own. So one of the big things, again, in the real hacking world is, who needs a configuration file when you can write a privacy policy? We've learned this very well. Mark Zuckerberg is one of the greatest hackers out there. He writes all these amazing policies and then does whatever the hell Mark Zuckerberg wants to do. Anyways, so the next thing to be thinking about is spoofing. Basically the idea with spoofing is using digital technologies. You're pretending to be somebody that you are not actually, right? Can I zoom into the? Nah, I can't zoom into this. So anyways, I have a couple of different things here to have you folks think about. Again, these are all real world products that actually exist. So one of the things, again, is with email addresses. We talk about phishing attacks, where we send out fraudulent emails, spear phishing attacks, where we try to go after specific people with fraudulent emails, the whole 9 yards. One of the things to understand with email is that with PHP or many other coding languages, when you send out an email, there is no actual from validation, right? Like when that from line is just a variable value. Right now, when you use Outlook, when you use Gmail, that variable value is whatever your email address is, because they've configured your email client to work that way, because that makes sense for normal people. But remember, we're hackers now. We're not normal people. And so if all you have is a variable value, you could probably change that variable value to whatever the hell you want. And so one of the things here is like the headers. Like so this is PHP. So basically with this PHP script right here, to email, so this is the to email address, the subject, whatever the subject is, the message, whatever that whole message is, and then the headers, so you can put from, and then you can put from whoever you want. And then you use the mail function, you give all those variable values, and you send the email. So, right? You could send an email to somebody using a PHP script like this, CTO@yourcompany.com, I need you to give me X, Y, or Z, or human resources yourcompany.com, we need you to refill out a W-2, right? How many times have you been asked to refill out a W-2 for companies? A lot of times you get these types of things, you don't even think about it. Are you suspicious enough to actually call HR and ask them why they need your W-2 information? Of course not. Of course not. Because these people say they're from HR. I mean, if they say they're from HR, of course they're from HR. So you're just gonna give them the information, right? And so again, that basically is just a variable value that's dumped in there. So this is how you can spoof an email coming from a specific email address. Ridiculously too easy. One of the services that I don't understand why it's not illegal, to be clear, just to be clear, this should be illegal. We can have a lot of arguments on Second Amendment. We can have arguments even sort of on First Amendment. But then there's some things out there, you're like, no, why is this illegal? No, but seriously. So you can spoof basically using publicly available services. This is actually a screenshot I got from a publicly available service. You can use a publicly available service to disguise your caller ID, right? So if somebody calls in, again, to a company and they want to disguise their phone number as the CTO's phone number, the CEO's phone number, anything else, they can go through one of these services. And the important thing to be thinking about is, again, think about how data is given to you. So when somebody calls you and you see the phone number, all the information that goes around that phone number, the person's name, anything else, that's all done in your phone based off of the phone number being given to you. So if a phone number comes in that's identical to the CTO's phone number, then that phone number is going to show up, and above it is going to be a picture of the CTO and whatever other information you have about the CTO. And so it's very easy to go, oh, the CTO is calling me. Hello, CTO, what do you need? Oh, you need me to, I don't know, send all the backup files to, some email, some address out in Denver? Sure, I'll get right on that, boss. And so that's one of the things that's out there now is, again, this idea of basically being able to spoof a phone number, and then you can use that to make people think that you are somebody who they're not. The final thing when we start talking about spoofing is the idea of screwing around with domain names. There's less of this spoofing now with domain names than there used to be, but it's still out there. So with this particular example, this is a form here for sign in. It's asking for the email address and the password, but the domain name is Amazon with an additional N. So Amazon.com goes to Amazon's web server. Amazon with an additional N goes to whoever, hacker's web server, and then they're able to collect your information that way. So basically all spoofing is it's pretending to be somebody or something digitally, like one of these digital devices that it's not actual. You can have servers spoofing themselves to print it into be other servers. And there's all kinds of interesting spoofing attacks out there. Again, when we start talking about phishing, basically the idea with phishing is you send out emails, nefarious emails with phishing to lots and lots and lots of different people. Let's say everybody in a company, everybody in a particular area. You slightly customize it so people think like it's actually relevant to them. And then one of the things that you do with these phishing emails is you put a hyperlink in the email that it visually appears to be to something that they know. So this is to PayPal.com security. That is what they see. But remember, when you deal with hyperlinks, there is what you see, and then there's the actual link. So what you can do here is you can have the href actually point to whatever the hell you want it to point to, but it says paypal.com.security or yourcompany.com/security, whatever else. You then aren't thinking about it, you click on that link, you go to a site that looks identical to the site that you're supposed to be going to, you plug in your username, you plug in your password, and the hackers now have your information. I don't understand what's going on. One of the interesting things with this too is they now have a bypass for two-factor authentication, which is kind of sucky, where if you do go to one of these nefarious sites, these spoofed sites, what happens is they have this automatic system. So let's say you go to Amazon.com. So you go to the spoof site. You're going to the spoof site. You plug in your username. You plug in your password. But don't worry, you've got two-factor authentication, right? Two-factor authentication will save you. Well, the interesting thing is as you're plugging your information in to the fake Amazon.com account, their system is plugging that in real time into Amazon.com. And then Amazon.com is then going to ask for that two-factor authentication key. And at the exact same time, that's going to trigger the fake site that you're on to ask for a two-factor authentication key. You then get your cell phone or whatever else, you plug your two-factor authentication key in, you hit OK, that then sends that to the hackers, they then plug that into actual Amazon.com, and they have now bypassed two-factor authentication. They haven't really bypassed two-factor authentication, they used two-factor authentication, but they used it in a non-traditional way. So this is the idea with phishing attacks. Spear phishing attacks is when you go and you actually try to find specific people. Oh, Paul Zachary Hunter. To be clear, this is all public information. To be clear, Susan, this is all public information. Anyways, basically the idea with a spear phishing attack is that you want to target a specific person for a specific reason. Let's say you want to go after a specific company, so on and so forth. They have something that you are actually interested in. And so one of the amazing things that we have nowadays in the modern world is we have these massive publicly available databases that just give you a crap ton of personal information about people. And guess what? When you have a crap ton of personal information about people, it's a hell of a lot easier to do social engineering and phishing attacks and everything else. So basically with this, I went to Google, to be clear. All I did is I went to Google and I typed in LinkedIn Asheville CTO, and Zachary Hunter popped up. This is all public motherfuckers. I didn't violate anybody's privacy. This is completely public. Anyways, you look. He is a CTO at Acquient, designing and building software that differentiates here and This might be what my wife talks about. You know, my wife every once in a while, she's like, Eli, there's a reason people don't always like you. Well, I don't understand, I'm a nice guy. That's because I'm putting all this information. Anyways, maybe my wife has a point. But anyways, so we have all this information. He's in Asheville, he's got 343 connections, he has an about, you have all this information about where he's worked. So he's at CTO, he's been a CTO since 2014, he was a VP of software in 2010, director of application in 1999, went to University of Georgia, went to University of Chicago, as a member and board of directors of Hanger Hall School for Girls. They got all kinds of stuff here, and I'm not gonna click on any more. But basically, with this information that's just available on LinkedIn, you could keep going through this and finding more and more and more and more information about this particular person. But again, if you're really interested in going after this particular person as a target, that's when you can go and you're doing spear phishing attacks, because there's some reason that you think this particular person is valuable. Again, you think about this in the modern world. If there is a CTO for a company that deals with financial transactions, if there's a CTO of a company that deals with medical transactions, if there's a CTO of a company that deals with military contracts or something like that, it may be very valuable to basically attack them. And if you get all of this information, you can start putting things together so that you can figure out the best way to go after a person like this. Again, one of the things a lot of folks don't think about is in the real world of things like intelligence operations, you're not just sitting behind a keyboard all the time, right? A lot of wannabe hackers or whatever, they just think it's all, you're just behind a keyboard and that's it. But remember, in the real world, sometimes you gotta get your hands dirty, and you just gotta drink a couple of beers. you just gotta drink a couple of beers for the team sometimes. All right, so if I know I want to go after this person, one of the things I'm going to look for is things like Meetup. I'm going to look for other things that they're involved with, and then I'm going to try to become involved with those things. And then give it a little bit of time, you know, to actually target them, figure out who they are, figure out who they know, figure out a time to go up and have a conversation with them. And now that I have all this information, because I've been able to do all of this research on who they are, where they're from, what they're interested in, I'll have that information so that we can have a nice old conversation about something I do not give a crap about, but they really care about, so that we can then create a relationship. Again, relationships are valuable for many, 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 many reasons. And then you can go from there and you can start to learn things about people. It's amazing. If you just sit there and you talk with people, they will talk about their spouses, they will talk about their siblings, they will talk about their kids, they will talk about all kinds of wonderful information that you just dump into your own private database for what you're going to be dealing with things in the future. Again, one of the things to be thinking about in this modern world, as I say, if you have to put in a resume for a technology company, you're probably not going to get the job. Many jobs in the real technology world, basically the way that people get them is that people like the cut of your jib, and they say, hey, I don't suppose you want to get hired. Oh, me? I can't believe the CTO of this company likes me so much and they want to hire me. I am so flattered and I would be so thankful to be able to get in your company and to be able to work on your infrastructure. You don't know how happy it would make me to be able to every single day bypass all of your security mechanisms, walk into your server room, and directly be able to sit down at a keyboard of one of your servers. You will make me the happiest boy alive. One of the things to be thinking about in the real world, right? That's a great way to do hacking. Best way to do hacking. In their own server room. How'd you get into their server room? They hired me. What? Yeah, they're actually paying me a lot of money to screw them. I kind of feel like a prostitute right now. I wonder if this is how prostitutes feel. Right? Things to be thinking about. Again, other things to be thinking about. If you're targeting a company, again, in this modern world of remote workers, one of the big things to understand is the points of vulnerability may not be the institution, may not be within the company walls, right? Within the company walls, you have firewalls, you have routers, hopefully you have the security mechanisms that you're supposed to have. Here's the thing, most home users don't have that, right? If you take this, if you take a Raspberry Pi, you slap this onto the internet connection, whether it's cable modem or fiber optic modem or DSL or whatever else, you slap this onto a home internet connection, all of a sudden you can be sniffing everything that goes into or out of that home all day long, having it sent to you or storing it on this or whatever else. Usernames, passwords, credentials, files, all kinds of really cool stuff. Now, one of the things that was brought up, somebody in the class was like, yeah, but Eli, but you know, if you're using a VPN, then even if the traffic goes through a device that's sniffing the network, it should still be secure. But again, here's the thing: if you're a home user, how many times are you using a VPN? A lot of people, when they're at home, when people are at home, they assume, to make an ass of you and me, they assume that their home internet connection is secure. And the fact of the matter is many times it's not. The other thing to be thinking about is, again, other points of vulnerability. A spouse, kids, whatever else, other people living in the house, can you infect one of their systems and then be able to interact with things that way? These are all some of the interesting things to be thinking about. And this is the real world of spear phishing attacks. Again, I think this is a horrible idea. Can I be honest? I think this is one of the most interesting things about the modern world. In the modern world, people are like, I want you to know everything about me. It's so weird. I come from an entirely different world. People ask me questions, I'm like, fuck off. I'm like, oh, you don't know the answer to that question? No. Then you probably don't need to now, do you, jackass? Here's an interesting thing, right? We have everybody nowadays putting all of this information online. This is not Chinese hackers. Chinese hackers are not forcing people to put all of their historical information online. You know, North Korean hackers aren't compiling all of this stuff so somebody can plug into Google. Google, hey, I'm looking for a CTO for this company, and go after them. And so something to really be thinking about is it wise? Is it wise that you have all of this information, especially if you're in a position like this person is? Again, been working for the company apparently 21 years. 22 years. Been working for the company 22 years. I'm just going to put this out there. He's probably not going to get poached. He's probably not in the job market. So I'll put all this information out there. If it doesn't give you the value to get a job, something to think about. But yeah, spear phishing attack is going after a specific person. That's incredibly easy to research nowadays. The next thing to talk about is Sql Injection Attacks. So Sql Injection Attacks are pretty cool. These should not work if you have proper form validation and a number of other things, but sometimes they do. Basically, the idea with a SQL injection attack is whenever you deal with a form on a website, that is the front end. The back end is a database system. So you may hear of MySQL, MariaDB, some kind of NoSQL thing, you know, anyways, NoSQL databases or whatever else. So this information is basically sent to the database tries to find out if it is true, if that exists. If it's true, it allows you into the system. So basically what happens is you put in the username of WUM, and it says select all from WUM table where user ID is WUM and password is WUM tool. right? So if wum and wum tool equal the username and a password within the database, then allow this person into the system. Here's one of the interesting things though, right? This is an actual SQL statement that's being put into the database. So if you can somehow exit out of the initial SQL statement and then run your own SQL statement or add to their SQL statements, then you can get results out of the database that are not expected. So basically with this, he puts in 1 or 1 equals 1. Select all from one table where user ID equals 1 or 1 equals 1 and password 1 or... Anyways, basically what this does is it dumps all the information into the database. It should actually pop out on the form in front of you. And so basically all SQL injection attacks is where you're adding additional SQL, structured query language in the database world. You're adding additional SQL to try to get the database to do something it's not supposed to. One of the things with SQL injection is when it used to work in the old days, probably still works now in some old systems, is you can actually do things like create users. If an administrator was really stupid, and if you actually have root permission, basically what's running all of this has root permission in the database, you can actually do an add user, create your own user, give your own user essentially root privileges, and then basically own that database. So that's the idea with a SQL injection attack. The next attack that's out there is called denial of service, or you may hear of distributed denial of service attacks. Essentially with denial of service attacks, what these attacks are is when you use all the resources a server or a computer system has to offer so that legitimate traffic is no longer able to actually use the resources. So this used to be, there used to be something called the ping of death. This is very old, has not worked for 20 years. But hackers would go after a particular server, and essentially they would send so many ping commands at the servers that the servers were responding to the ping commands, and then it couldn't actually respond to web clients that were actually trying to go see a website. Yeah. Remember, whenever you complain about computers nowadays, just remember, I used to work on computers in a time period where you had to worry about the resource consumption of ping. Just saying. But anyways, that's the idea of denial of service attack. So it may be the ports. So something to be thinking about is like an old-fashioned old telephone system, like a digital telephone system, the ones that I used to work on. We used to have telephone, basically cards that you put into those systems, and those would connect to trunk lines from your telephone company, Verizon, Qwest, whatever else. So basically, in order to call the outside world, you needed one line to be free. So if you had a 30-person company, you'll normally have like 4 trunk lines, because realistically no more than 4 people were on the line at any point in time. So if you have one call coming in, that takes one line, one call going out takes another, one call coming in, right? So you get 4. So the idea is, you think about that with a company, is if people are talking, the actual resource consumption being used, most of the time they're talking on extensions, so they're talking with people internally, and there's actually very few calls. I mean, on a percentage basis, there's very few calls coming into or out, to the outside world. So one of the things with the denial of service attacks against the telephone system is with these telephone spoofing services that they have nowadays, you could simply do something like, if you know how many trunk lines you think that company has, if you simply call all those trunk lines at the exact same time, now no legitimate traffic can get through, no legitimate phone calls can get through, and things start failing out. So going after, let's say, a pizza company, right? You have a pizza delivery company. If you have an idea of how many telephone lines are coming in, you simply use 20 telephone numbers to call at the same time, and all of a sudden all the trunk lines are now being used up, and so you have a denial of service attack. Another thing to be thinking about, like one of the things that I worry about in the modern world, again, we talk about denial of service attacks. All we are talking about with denial of service attacks is using up all of the resources so that legitimate users cannot use the resources. One of the things I think of right now is with Meetup. I'm having a big problem with assholes. Hi. Anyways, I'm having a big problem with this, right? I'm having people in India sign up for my meetups. You're in Bangalore. I love Indian food. I love Chiki. They've got these like little sweets. Oh, I can eat that crap all day. Look, I don't got any problem with Indians. You're in Bangalore. You are not going to come to Asheville for a meetup. That is just reality, right? But again, one of the problems that I have with Meetup is that I have folks that essentially sign up for slots that they are not actually going to use. That means then when legitimate users want to then sign up for the meetup that I'm having, they get shut out of the meetup, right? So for me, one of the big problems I have right now is my room. You can't see it, but it's about 270 square feet. Right, it's actually a fine office. It's actually a very nice office in many ways. It's just a little bit small for these meetups, right? When you have 10 people in here, we are doing a study to find out if people can actually learn from osmosis. That's right, we squeeze so many people in the room. We're trying to see if thoughts move from one to the other when they're squeezed in like little sardines. Anyways, jokes aside, the reality is you just can't put that many people in this room. 10 people is about the map. 10 is like tolerable. 10 is a level of tolerable. So for me, I only allow 10 people to come to the meetups. So here's the thing. If I have people from Bangalore, if I have people from Jaipur, if I have people from Paris, they sign up for my meetup, they take up a slot, right? They are now taking up slots they know that they are not going to be able to use, and then that causes real problems. Again, you think about this, how it can cost a company or it can cost an organization money. One of the reasons I don't really provide much in the way of food or drink anymore, right? I used to do pizza. I used to be nice about things like food and drink until I got to be a cranky bastard. A lot of people out there, they're like, Eli, why are you such a cranky, crotchety bastard all the time? I'm like, let me tell you a story. Let me tell you about a time I was nicer. And then I learned what assholes human beings can really be. Anyways, but think about this. You used to buy food, you used to buy all that kind of stuff. And so, if you have a company, if you have an organization, they're going to do a meetup, they're going to do an event, you have a lot of people sign up for slots that they're not actually going to use. That company then just buys a lot of food and refreshments and everything else. They have a facility, they have, right? And then 2 people show up. Right? That is a denial of service attack, and that actually causes financial damage to the company and can cause many other problems. So again, we start talking about these things again. Like I said, when we talk about denial of service attack or distributed denial of service attack, people talk about the low orbit ion cannon. I don't even know if this still works anymore. But this is what they're talking about, the big botnets and all that kind of stuff. Like botnets are cool, right? Everybody's like, oh. Eli, have you heard about the latest botnet? And again, in the real world, are we really worried about the botnets or some of these more, blasé things that are really going on? The next thing to be talking about is ransomware. So ransomware is interesting because basically the reason ransomware happens is because there are a lot of awful administrators out there. If most systems administrators were worth their salaries, ransomware would not exist. But because they're not worth their salaries, ransomware does. So what happens with ransomware? Basically what happens with ransomware is a virus, malware, gets into a server, gets into a computer, and then encrypts all the data on that computer. Then a little thing comes up and essentially says, hey, pay us in Bitcoin and we will give you the decryption key. Why this is a problem, and again, why I blame system administrators for this, and why I think many system administrators should literally go to jail. For any professionals out there, I'm just putting this out there, like gross negligence, where because of you being dumb, bad things happen to a lot of people. I'm not sure why you don't think you should get at least a couple of days of jail time for this. But anyways, basically how a lot of these this ransomware is able to occur is that you have system administrators that have root access to directory trees. All right, so when you're dealing with the database, MySQL, MariaDB, whatever, some kind of NoSQL database, the normal way that you interact with that database is you create a connection to the database and then you get your SQL statements. But do realize, more or less with a database, it's just a file. It's just a file. It's a file sitting in some folder somewhere. So the normal way that you interact with it is this way. And so you have privileges, which are these permissions. You have all the security, hopefully, on the database itself. But the interesting thing, if you don't have a security on the file structure, the folder structure, then somebody can just encrypt your entire damn database. No, they didn't have root access to the database. They didn't have privileges on the database. They did a SQL statement. They just were able to get to the folder that contained the database. However they accessed that folder had permission to encrypt anything within the folder, and now you have ransomware. So this is one of the big problems, again, like with a lot of system administrators, right? They will have permission to the root directory for the profiles folder. So depending on how your Microsoft infrastructure is done, many times you have what's called a profiles folder. Within that profiles folder is all of the profiles for your users. What is on their desktop, what is in their documents, what is in their favorites for websites and all that kind of stuff that can sit in a profiles folder, right? And so everybody has their own individual path to those profiles folders, and they have their normal permission. But here's the thing: if you log in and if you have the administrator account, you have a global administrator account, and you're able to access the root of those profiles, so the root directory for profiles. If somebody is able to essentially use your credentials or use you in order to access that profiles folder, and then they simply encrypt the entire profiles folder and everything within it, then all of a sudden a lot of people are screwed. So one of the big things with ransomware is just simply people are bypassing the normal way of being able to access the files and folders, and then they're just encrypting whatever the hell basically their bots or whatever can find. The reason for this is, again, a lot of system administrators, even in today's age, they still log in with global administrator accounts. The one security thing, again, I'm not going to get into a lot of security with this particular class, but whenever you log in, you should not be logging in with an administrator account. Even if you are an administrator, you're a senior system administrator that's been doing this stuff for 20 years. So I'm sure there's no way in hell you're actually logging into that account when you check your email. Now, is there? Well, that's the thing. People log in with their global administrator accounts in order to check email, and they click on something that they're not supposed to. Their computer is now infected. It's infected while they are logged in with global system administrator privileges, and all hell breaks loose. That is basically how ransomware works. Again, this is why a lot more sysadmins should be worried about jail time. This says a lot about the garbage condition of the sysadmin world. It says more about that than it says about the hackers in many ways. The next thing out there is keyloggers. So there is a keylogger for everything nowadays. Basically what a keylogger does is it logs everything that you type into a computer. You type in a username, it logs it. Types in a password, it logs it. You type in a love letter to your long lost lover. It logs all that crap too. Depending on how it's set up, it then will either send it off in real time, or it'll send it off intermittently, or it may even store it locally so that somebody can go and collect it later. When you're looking at keyloggers, there are keyloggers for smartphones, there are keyloggers that can actually be built directly into keyboards, there are keyloggers for normal PCs, there are hardware keyloggers for PCs, the whole 9 yards. So basically, however you can collect the keystrokes, they are collected. This is one of the interesting things. When people talk about Tor, right? A lot of people they feel cool. They're like, Eli, I'm secure. I use Tor. Here's the problem. Tor encrypts your traffic from your computer to the nodes out in the real world. When you're tippy-tap typing on your computer, if there's a keylogger on your computer, your keyboard's not encrypted. Everything you type into your computer is collected by the keylogger, and again, can be sent out, right? So if you're going to particular websites, if you are IM messaging, again, you think about this with, intelligence organizations or whatever else. They don't necessarily need to know what the person on the other side said. They only need to know what the hell you said. So if you're sitting there on the dark web, like a cool kid, you know what I'm saying? You're sitting there, you're on the dark web, you're like, yeah, I'm gonna teach somebody so-and-so, and you start typing away. Remember, your half of the conversation can be just grabbed up by a keylogger and shipped off to whoever is interested in it, right? And there can be a lot of information there that can then be correlated with other things and other databases, the whole 9 yards. So keyloggers can be very powerful. Again, everything from usernames and passwords to entire IM conversations. anything you plug in, websites, the whole 9 yards. And the interesting part too is like with text, one of the things I talk about in like my more real tech classes is text is incredibly easy to parse, like incredibly easy to parse, right? So I just have this big massive text file, everything that you've typed into your computer over the past month. I can run scripts against that to pull out specific information. I want to see every website that this person typed. Here's every website that this person typed. I want to get specific information. You can pull out all that specific information relatively easily. It's actually really kind of cool. One of the next classes I'm going to do is with Azure Cognitive Services. I'm really excited about Azure Cognitive Services. Fabulous. But one of the things is, what is it called? It's like text syntax. I just started playing with it today. But one of the interesting things, so with Azure Cognitive Services, you can actually feed Azure Cognitive Services a text file, and then it can pull out specific information that you want. So if you want to know things like, I want the social security, every social security number or phone number or specific things, you can actually feed it a text file, and it will go through and it will correlate all the data that you're looking for and print it out or dump it into a database or whatever else. Easy peasy for a couple of cents. You can probably use the free service to be able to do all that kind of thing. So that's what's going on with keyloggers. There's a lot of keyloggers out there, so you gotta be careful with those. The next thing is sniffing. So sniffing, the big company that does sniffing is Wireshark. They have an open source product, plus they have a professional product. There's a lot of companies out there that also do sniffing too. Basically with sniffing, they can grab everything. Capture files compressed with gzip, can be decompressed on the fly. Live data can be read from Ethernet, 802.11, blah blah, Bluetooth, token ring, frame relay, the whole 9 yards. Output can be exported, multiple flat platforms, the whole 9 yards. Rich VoIP analysis if you want. One of the big things to understand with sniffing is with this, you are able to collect all of the data that's going by in the network. So anything that your computer can hear, all of that information can be collected, and then it can be dumped somewhere, so that again it can go through and be parsed later. Again, usernames, passwords, entire files. Again, if you're looking for people's confidential information, W-2s. How many people are emailing W-2s to the HR person? If you can sniff the traffic going to the HR person, you can now collect every single W-2 that is going to the HR person. So basically all sniffing does is it reads the traffic going by, and then with the good stuff, it's actually able to put everything back into files, back into emails, back into files, in such a way that you are then able to actually read or view or interact with that kind of file. So that's what sniffing is, and pretty cool. Then we have RATs, remote administration tools. TeamViewer for the bad guys, aka TeamViewer. Oh, come on. Gotta put a couple of good jokes in there. So basically what RATs are is remote administration tools. These are the tools that admins have been using for decades at this point. And if the sysadmin's been using it for decades, at some point the hackers had to figure out that it was actually pretty useful. Basically, this is remote desktop. This is VNC type stuff. Essentially, you're able to access the computer. You're able to put in keystrokes. You're able to read what's on the screen, the whole 9 yards. One of the interesting things to think about with remote desktop software is that the way that you interact with it is basically designed by whoever coded it, right? So most of the time, like when you use remote desktop, at least the last time I used Microsoft Remote Desktop, if I remoted in to a computer, the monitor of that computer would essentially go to a screensaver so that I was able to interact with it. So only one person was able to interact with that remote desktop computer at any one time, and that is a security thing. That is a component of security that Microsoft built in so that you don't have two people using the computer at the same time, essentially one person spying on the other. The thing that you have to understand is that was not a technical limitation by any stretch of the imagination. That was actually simply designed, like, hey, we don't want to use people to use remote desktop to spy on people. Well, if you have hackers, or if you have people that know how to code and actually create their own remote access tools, they can design the remote access tools however they decide to. So basically what they do with these remote access tools is they design it so both people can see the computer. They design it so that nothing pops up in the little that little tray, you know, where normally you see VNC or remote desktop or whatever down in Windows. You know, normally something pops up there. Again, that has to be designed in. If a hacker simply decides to not tell you that their software is running, you don't have to see that that software is running, right? All of these tools, basically you modify it, so people can access the computers. Again, one of the nasty things, again, in the real world is, and this has been happening for a while now, is this whole thing where young ladies' computers get infected with remote access tools. The remote access tools are used in order to do things like access webcams, and so basically you have these hackers that take pictures. So you take pictures, I mean, since a computer, right? How many people bring their computers into their bedrooms? I don't. That would be stupid. Distrust, verify, stay suspicious. I barely even bring my smartphone into my frickin' bedroom. Anyways, a lot of people, again, trust their systems, so they have their computers open in their bedroom, and then they have the hackers, and they take pictures, or they take video, whatever else, you know, people do what they do in their bedrooms, and then basically they'll send a message to the person where they collected these videos and information, and say, if you do not give us Bitcoin, we will release this onto Pornhub, or onto Facebook, or whatever else, and a lot of people are put into bad positions. So that's basically what remote access tools are. And again, it gets to be a very interesting thing. Like literally, if you could design a remote access tool the way you wanted it to be designed, what would you have? And that's what the hackers are doing. Why I put in the joke of TeamViewer, that's a joke, right? Is a couple of years ago, TeamViewer basically is a platform type service, again, for remote desktop. Hackers were able to get into TeamViewer, and then they were able to access TeamViewer accounts. So basically the hackers were able to hack TeamViewer so they could then access the client computers that were connected to TeamViewer. So again, with all of this stuff, be very careful. It's only tools. It's tools. Then there are man-in-the-middle attacks. Basically the idea with a man-in-the-middle attack is that you somehow get in between the communication between your computer and whoever you're trying to communicate with, and you collect all of the information. Again, the perfect example that I would argue in the modern world are VPNs. VPNs are awesome man-in-the-middle attacks. Not supposed to think about it that way, but it really is, right? So when you connect to a VPN server, all of your network traffic is going through the VPN server. Now, if you ever actually dealt with VPNs, what you'll realize is these are just normal servers, right? Windows has what's called Routing and Remote Access Server, RAS, and that's just part of the thing that's built into the Windows server. So if you have a Windows server that's offering VPN services, you know, you can just add a couple of other components to that server to, you know, add whatever other functionality that you want. I mean, shouldn't everything that go through the server, shouldn't that be stored just to make sure it's okay? Anyways, Windows has, you know, again, their VPN services. Again, most of the VPN services that you're going to be using in the real world are most likely going to be connecting through some kind of a Linux VPN server. Again, the important thing to understand, if it's a Linux VPN server, then the VPN service is one of the services that it can offer. It can also offer many other services that you may not be thinking about. But that's the idea. Like one of the things you can think about too is if you have a Raspberry Pi, one of the interesting things to consider is that if you can figure out a way to shut down the DHCP server on the local network, you could then use your Raspberry Pi as the DHCP server and then start routing traffic wherever you want that traffic routed to, right? So you think about the DHCP server, you get your IP address, your subnet mask, your default gateway, right? The router, how to get out of the network, and your primary and secondary DNS. Now here's an interesting thing. What if you put a Raspberry Pi in the network, it gets what the default gateway is, it gets all this information, it comes up with its own DHCP scheme. So basically what happens now is if you can figure out a way to shut down the local DHCP server, which there are ways you can do that through coding, you can shut down the local DHCP server, then your little Raspberry Pi can start acting like the DHCP server for the network. It then starts providing IP addresses, fine. It starts providing subnet masks, fine. It starts providing default gateways that you have decided what the default gateway is. So now, instead of the default gateway being the router that it's supposed to be, you now make the default gateway your Raspberry Pi. That then means everything that's supposed to go off network or out onto the WAN, that will now come through your Raspberry Pi. Your Raspberry Pi will collect whatever information it decides to collect, and then it will keep the traffic going off onto the internet. It'll come back, and again, your users, if they don't understand what's going on, they won't even see that kind of thing happen. So that's what we're talking about with man-in-the-middle attacks. And this is why it's very important to keep your own internal infrastructure clean. The next thing is supply chain attacks. So we've been hearing about supply chain attacks recently because of Russia. Russia, Russia, Russia. It's always Russia. You know, there's some cooler stuff out there than Russia. I mean, I don't want to talk badly about Putin or anything, but Russia's actually not the most interesting stuff going on in the hacking world. It is true. Anyways, the big thing that we've been hearing about lately is the Solarwinds attack. And so basically what the Solarwinds attack is theoretically, supposedly, don't sue me, Putin, I'm just saying supposedly, Russia compromised SolarWinds infrastructure, and then they're able to compromise one of their updates. So SolarWinds was great software. I feel very torn with this. SolarWinds was one of those companies I was a big cheerleader for all the way up until this crap happened. The reason is because they offer a lot of software that allows you to do preventive maintenance and be able to audit your network. So if you want to do patch management on your network, if you want to do network scanning your network, if you want to do SNMP, so Simple Network Management Protocol, be able to collect a lot of information off of your network. SolarWinds has awesome products. It costs about $50 per agent, which seems a lot to young people, but I would hand that over in a heartbeat. Really great stuff. The problem is when Russia compromised SolarWinds, is the thing is with SolarWinds, right? SolarWinds is essentially kind of like auto managing your network, right? It is deep into your network. It's seeing the traffic that's going on. It's understanding the patch management. It's understanding the permissions and all that kind of stuff. And so what Russia was able to do is they compromise the update, right? So all software needs updates. We don't even think about it anymore. Just like your Windows computer needs to get updated, those SolarWinds agents need to get uploaded. SolarWinds, the local software went up. They pulled down the updates from SolarWinds, and all hell broke loose. Again, this is one of the big problems we deal with in the modern world of technology, is we have this idea that at a certain point, something is supposed to be a known good. You have something that is known good, and then it gets compromised. So much of the security systems and so much of the way that people think about security is based off of this, frankly, wrongful way of thinking. Known good that gets compromised. Here's the thing. What if it never should have been considered a known good? Again, if you have an update, if you get a brand new computer from Dell, people think that it's known good. What if it got compromised in shipping? Right, that's what happened with China. So China back, I think it was 2017, they did a really interesting attack. They basically went after a large hard drive. So back in 2007, large hard drives at that time were 500 gigs or 1 terabyte. At that point, they were pretty expensive. So really the only people buying large hard drives at the time were corporations and governments. So China had this wise idea, like, well, if these organizations have firewalls and they have security policies and they have all this stuff to keep us, from getting in from the internet, what if we just infect the literal hard drives themselves before they get shipped to the end user? So you pull out a brand new hard drive, you shove it into your RAID array, and China now owns your infrastructure, right? You think about that? How many people, especially when you're dealing with large hard drives, how many people take a brand new hard drive out and then put it into some kind of system to securely wipe it? That's what should happen, but people don't. They pull a hard drive out and they shove a hard drive into the system. They buy that, basically that bypasses all of the security. Now to be clear, again, I don't care. I'm not on either side of this political equation. I just find all this stuff funny. NSA decided that they're going to try to one-up China on this deal. And what NSA decided to do is that they were actually intercepting shipments of Cisco equipment. So routers, switches, the whole 9 yards. They were then unboxing the Cisco equipment as it was going from point A to point B. They were then adding their own special components to that hardware, repackaging everything so that it looked like it was just directly from Cisco. And then what did people do? They pull it out of the box, they rack it into their rack, they connect everything up, and now the NSA owns those particular networks. Again, the idea that something is known good, right? I know it's good because I pulled it out of the box. If you can compromise a device or an update or whatever before they pull it out of the box, there's just the assumption that it's good, right? If it was good when we got it, then what happened to compromise it? Maybe it was compromised beforehand. And then like right now, there's a supply chain attack on Android devices. This is from 2019. This has been going on for years at this point. China just don't like Africa for some reason. So right now it's going on in Africa. Basically low-cost smartphones that are being sold in Africa. Android is basically being compromised before they actually get sold to the end user. So these are $20, $30 smartphones. And then all of a sudden a whole bunch of information and other things is being collected from the people that are now using those Android phones. So that's basically the idea of a supply chain attack. Overlooked vulnerabilities, things that people don't think about a lot of times, is backups. Right? You have all this security. You have all this security for all of your virtual machines and all of your infrastructure and everything else. But everybody needs to take backups. In the modern world, a lot of people, they store those backups to some kind of other, like a backup server, some kind of hard drive, NAS, SAN, that type of thing. What's interesting is as much time and energy as people will spend securing the servers when they are live, once a backup is taken, many times those backups are not secured properly. One of the interesting things in the modern world is many of the modern backups are full virtual machines, which brings all kinds of interesting, horrifying things to be thinking about. So it's curious, why it's curious that these are virtual machines, is a virtual machine is all your data and everything that can be spun up and can be live. Well, basically what you can get in the real world of hacking is you can basically get a computer version of one of those sci-fi horror movies where somebody is basically resurrected, they get tortured to death, and then they get resurrected again and tortured to death, and resurrected again and tortured to death until at some point that they break. You've seen those movies. Those are all sci-fi movies. Well, you can essentially do the same thing with these backups, right? These backups are virtual machines. So what you can do, if you're trying to penetrate that virtual machine or do whatever else, is you can create a clone of the virtual machine, spin up the virtual machine, attack the ever-loving crap out of it every way that you want to attack it to try to penetrate or try to get whatever else. If you then corrupt that virtual machine that you created, you destroy that. You clone the original again. You start attacking the clone until it gets corrupted or whatever else. Then you kill that one, and you keep going, you keep going, you keep going. Again, like normally when you're dealing with normal systems and you're trying to penetrate normal systems, one of the concerns is what if you corrupt the system? What if because of your attacks you corrupt the system to such a degree that nobody's going to get crap out of it, right? Even the rightful people aren't going to be able to get crap out of it. If you keep cloning, that changes the game. Third-party software. Again, when I talk about that CRM solution, why pay Salesforce $50 per month when we will offer the exact same service for $3? Again, a lot of people don't think about this. You know, when it's connecting and it's connecting to all your Google apps, when it's connecting to your Office 365, when it's connecting to all of these other things. Remember, you've just basically more or less given that third-party app root permission to everything that you have. This is very concerning. Again, one of my old FTC compliance. One of my old and one of my best sponsors used to be Spiceworks. And anybody knows me knows this is going to go bad really quick. Anyways, one of the things that I found fascinating with Spiceworks is I love Spiceworks software. Let me be clear. They were a wonderful sponsor, and I used Spiceworks for a long time. But the thing with Spiceworks is that what they did is they offered essentially free to the end user network scanning software, network management software. So they had a help desk solution at one point. You would basically install this software onto like a computer on your network. It would go out, it would scan all of the devices so that you could have a real-time understanding of what's going on with your infrastructure, the whole 9 yards, right? And this was free. This was free. Why pay SolarWinds $50 per month per agent when you can use something like Spiceworks for free? What I thought was very amusing is, and you can go back and you can watch an interview of this. I interviewed the CEO at the time of Spiceworks, and one of the things that I said, I just kind of threw this out there, is just like, out of curiosity, what's your counterintelligence capabilities? He failed that question. He failed that question. He was like, what do you mean? What's your counterintelligence capabilities? You are literally giving a free piece of software that you want people to put into small and mid-sized companies to scan their entire network, essentially find all the vulnerabilities of that network. who are you paying to verify that somebody, I'm not going to say who, somebody hasn't tried to do something nasty to your code? And the answer was not, well, Eli, that's actually confidential information that I can't go into. That was not the answer I got. The answer I got, I think you're blowing that out of proportion. You can go back. You can actually watch a 2-hour interview. And again, this is a big problem, right? People installing this stuff onto the network, and it gives a lot of visibility to hackers or such. And so something to come up with. Yeah, come up with your own Spiceworks. Come up with your own network scanning. We have a network scanning software that automatically uploads your information to the cloud. And we have a privacy policy that states only you can see what it sees. Anyways, what do you think? Do you think I still have a YouTube channel at this point? I'm sitting here as I do this video, and I'm thinking, oh, well, it was fun. YouTube was fun. Anyways, tools of the trade. Some things to be thinking about, like basically tools that are out there, just things to consider. There's network scanning software out there. So this is actually called Nmap. I did videos on Nmap before, really cool. Basically, this is just a open source network scanning thing that will go out there. It'll scan all the computers, all the devices on your network, show what ports are open, the whole 9 yards. And so all of this can be saved. So again, if you're doing something like a hacking attack, when you have something like command and control services, essentially you can have this little Raspberry Pi scanning the network. Let's say it scans every hour, collects all that information, throws it into a text file, then sends that text file up to a command and control server so that command and control server can figure out what it should do. So basically, it'll go through and it'll scan all the servers or whatever, all the devices on the network. It'll see that certain ports are open. Let's say the SSH port is open on this particular computer, and so command and control server may then send back and say, okay, try to do a brute force attack. Brute force attack is where you just try to use generic usernames and passwords to try to get into a computer. Try to do a brute force attack against the first computer that you saw had its SSH open. And then what can happen is basically with the device, it can then go and can do the brute force attack. If it works, it can then send something up the command and control server to say, hey, that worked, what should I do next? Or if it fails, it can send that information up to the command and control server, and then the command and control server can then give a response back to say, okay, go to the next thing, or whatever else. So network scanning software is some pretty good stuff. Again, there's Nmap and there's other solutions out there. Then there's Kali Linux. Kali Linux, again, you're a real hacker. You're a real hacker when you put your hat on and you use Kali Linux. Kali Linux is an interesting thing for when you're playing around and when you're starting. When you are learning, definitely use Kali Linux. After that point, stop using Kali Linux. You want to know why? Because the only people in the world that use Kali Linux are wannabe hackers. Either wannabe hackers or actual penetration testers that are not worried about getting arrested. Because you see this big logo? See this big logo right here? When you boot up Kali Linux, right? That's on the back of the desktop. And so again, if you want everybody to know what kind of hat you wear, you're most likely going to keep that symbol on your desktop. Here's the thing. When the security comes, when the police come, when the dorm people, again, if you're in college and something's been going on with the network, when they come and they break into your room and they see a computer and that is sitting on the desktop, you're going to have a lot of long discussions right there, right? Is why the hell else are you using Kali Linux? The interesting thing with Kali Linux is, again, basically this is a Debian distribution of Linux, just like Ubuntu or other Debian distributions of Linux. So basically any tool that'll work on Linux, on Kali, more or less, I think more, right, will actually work on Ubuntu. So if you have somebody break into your room and they see you working on a term paper on Ubuntu, you care about free software and liberty. You don't know about what's going on with the network. If you break in and you have that big ass dragon, you're gonna have some interesting conversations. The interesting thing with Kali Linux is OpenLink, is that they've got a lot of tools. So why people like Kali Linux? Again, to learn, and then install the tools on something else. install tools on something else. It's because it's got all these tools. So all these tools, again, like whenever you're dealing with Linux, when we talk about distributions, the difference between distributions is whatever is installed by default. So with Ubuntu, it gives you LibreOffice, right? Other things give you other things. Right, the big thing with Kali Linux is all of these tools, and they are a crap ton of tools, are installed by default on Kali. So if you want to just start playing with specific ones, you go to your favorite hacking website, and I don't know, they tell you how to use binwalk, and you're like, oh, I want to use binwalk. You can just go to your Kali Linux and you can just start using binwalk. You don't have to worry about installing it, so on and so forth. Again, they've just, I don't know, however many tools are. These are all the tools that are there. My argument is find whatever tools that work for you and then put them on Ubuntu. I'm just saying. Oh, let's see here. Other tools to trade. MalDuino. So this is part of the bad US, I think it's bad USB, yeah, that's yeah. It's part of the bad USB line. So the idea with the whole bad USB tools is, hey, what if we can use USB devices essentially to hack computers? So what's interesting about the MalDuino is when you plug this in, the computer sees it as if it's a keyboard. So generally this will work on Windows, this will work on Linux, this will work on Mac. It just looks like a keyboard as far as the system is concerned. And then what you can do is you can create a script to then feed that computer commands to do whatever you want. And the interesting part about this is you can be feeding the commands while somebody with escalated privileges is already logged into a system. Right, so imagine you walk into the system administrator, wherever the system administrator is, they are checking their email on their global, their domain administrator account. You slip this thing into the back of their computer so they don't notice it. As soon as this connects into the computer, it's detected as a keyboard. If you write your scripts properly, what's very interesting is you can actually open a terminal screen, basically a command line screen, but you do it quietly so that it can't actually be seen. And so you quietly open a command line screen, and then you just automatically run all these commands that you want to run, and then you pull it away and walk away, right? So basically, imagine if you plug it in and it goes to whatever directory. You say, okay, I want to tarball this particular directory, basically compress this particular directory, and then immediately FTP it off to a server. Right, that's the kind of thing that you can do with a MalDuino, and one of the reasons why they get to be a bit scary. Again, imagine you walk into a server room. So server rooms, the security for server rooms, every single rack in a server room should be physically locked. You walk into a physical server room, you have all those racks. All those racks should have front and back doors, and those racks should be locked. Which, of course, that's just security. A lot of folks don't. So again, you walk up to the Active Directory server, you walk up to whatever server, you plug one of these things into the back, it gets detected, boom, depending on what's going on. And again, you can pull out a lot of information or do some interesting things. Or you could plug it into the back and wait for somebody to log in. Again, you think about this like with server rooms. If you ever go into a real server room with these racks, there's lots of computers, there's lots of wires, there's lots of things going on. You plug this into the back of one of the servers that nobody has logged into yet. You walk away, that's just sitting in the back of the computer. Somebody logs in with administrator privileges. All of a sudden, if this thing fires off, it's now firing off with administrator privileges, and all hell breaks loose. The next thing that's kind of interesting in this whole bad USB line, it's just, I'm so happy I'm not an administrator right now. So they basically took that, and then they made it exponentially more scary. So this is a cable you can actually buy, $119. You can buy this thing, the O.MG Cable. I'm actually curious to buy this cable just to see what it's like. Basically, within this cable, it has a full-fledged web server. It has an 802.11 radio. It has memory, obviously processing, the whole 9 yards. So basically, there is a full-fledged web server sitting in this USB cable. Why this becomes very interesting, because with these USB cable, you can do USB to Lightning, you can be USB-A to C, you can do USB-A to micro. So this might be, you could have this plugged into a peripheral device. Imagine if you're walking through the infrastructure, you're taking a look around, and then you just start swapping a few USB cables that are these things. If they're able to actually do something like connect to the Wi-Fi network, so let's say you're an employee at the company or you know what the Wi-Fi password is or whatever, you have these things connect to the Wi-Fi network. If the Wi-Fi network is not being audited the way that it should, you now have a way basically to compromise every single computer that you've plugged one of these things into. It can send information out to you. You can basically use command and control. You can give control commands back to it and all kinds of fun. Again, one of the big problems you run into with security, if you're doing security in the real world, is understanding what devices should be in your infrastructure and what devices shouldn't be in your infrastructure. Again, how many people have old print servers still hanging around? I'm sure there's a few people out there that still have crappy old dusty print servers that are there. Do you know who installed those print servers? Do you know the last time that they were maintained? Do you even know that if they should still exist on your infrastructure or not? Right? There's a lot of boxes and a lot of things that sit around on people's infrastructure that nobody cares about. What does that do? Should we unplug it? No, I don't think we should unplug it. Right? Because again, everybody wants to trust what exists, and they are scared if they break something, right? If something was working and they unplug it, then they are going to get blamed for breaking something. Nobody wants to get blamed, right? Human psychology is really screwed up. People would rather not worry about something that may be a danger on their network versus actually trying to do something but risk the possibility that they will be wrong. So if you can plug this into somebody's infrastructure and there's a good chance it'll sit there for 10 years before anybody does anything about it, what do you think about peripheral cables? You just plug a couple of these things into peripheral devices and you walk the hell away, and I can almost guarantee you those things will be around a long time. People go, again, you have security audits. Okay, we're gonna do a security audit. Hey, what's this box? This box has gotta go. I mean, how many people are checking their USB cables? Then you have USBKill. These people are just bastards. See, there's assholes. See, there's hackers, there's assholes, and then there's just complete bastards. Don't buy this. Don't buy this. You should know that this exists. Don't buy this. You're just so many bad words. I will get kicked off of YouTube for the bad words for the people that use this thing. So basically what USBKill does for penetration testing is a lot of the USB connections on computing devices are designed in such a way that if you send electricity back in to the USB port, it will cause damage. It will either fry the USB controller itself, or many times it will actually fry the motherboard, right? This is just one of those things. Theoretically, supposedly, it could be designed differently, but you run into this in the real world. I ran into this when I was repairing computers, where the little insulator in the middle sometimes would break, and then you'd have the two sides, the USB connect, and all kinds of hell would break loose. Well, basically, the people that designed USBKill, you know, they want to be penetration testers. What they decided is that this is horrible. This is horrible. How dare these technology companies design products with USB ports where if somebody dumps a hell of a lot of electricity back through the USB port, that it will damage the computer. That's unconstitutional or something. I don't know. So anyways, basically what they originally did is they created these little USB devices. The USB device has a capacitor in it. So basically, when you plug the little USBKill device into a USB port, USB puts out electricity. It doesn't put out enough electricity to generally cause damage. So what they do is they have a capacitor. It keeps sucking up all that energy that it's getting from the USB port until it hits a level where if it gets sent back through the USB port, it can do a lot of damage. It basically hits that level, click, fires all the electricity back into the USB port, and damage ensues. And so this is penetration testing. I don't understand. Hey, I'm gonna do penetration testing on your car. I'm gonna take a sledgehammer. See, that's the thing, Windows are supposed to protect you from crap coming in your car. So I don't think your window was designed properly. So I'm gonna pick up this sledgehammer and I'm gonna slam it into your window. And when your window breaks, I'm gonna blame the auto manufacturer for creating defective windows. Yeah. Anyways, it's a real thing. And then beyond that, they went above and beyond. They've got version 4. This is version 4.0. They're using like CSS or something. There's a red color there. And, oh, they have updated this thing. They've updated this thing now. So test everything. Test everything. They give you 15 plus adapters, so you can now fry your iPhone, VGA ports, display ports, HDMI, micro USB, and more. You can penetrate test your VGA port, cause yeah, that's a thing. And then not only that, they added all this. Let's see, the USBKill has evolved beyond a simple plug and zap device. The new v4 hardware framework enables advanced functionality. Aside from more powerful discharges and improved stability, the v4 has an internal rechargeable battery that allows for offline attacks where the host device is not turned on. So before, with the USBKill, the device had to be turned on so the power comes into the USB, charges up that capacitor, sends the electricity back. Come on now! But what if we want to smash a window in a car and the car isn't on? We gotta give the sledgehammer a battery. So no, they can put a battery into this thing. So now you can just fry turned off devices too. Offline mode also bypasses all, and this is where I lose my mind with hackers. Yeah, I'm a hacker. I don't even understand the freaking point of this. Offline mode also bypasses all known USB-C and Lightning security protocols, rendering the V4 the ultimate device for testing smartphones and modem hardware. Yeah, we made sure our sledgehammer was so big it goes through every window, which makes it that much better for penetration testing car windows. They have remote trigger, so you can remotely trigger this darn thing if you want to. Smartphone trigger timed attacks, so you can plug one of these stupid ass things into a server or whatever, and then walk away for up to 200 days. Yeah, this isn't hacking. Let me be clear. This isn't hacking. This is being an asshole. This is being a piece of garbage. This is being what we call in the computer world, the technical term, is an absolute piece of crap. So anyways, that exists. Anywho, then you have things like password crackers. So again, as I talked about back in the day, sometimes you have a computer, you need to bypass the password for some reason. People forget what the password is. You have somebody left the company, that type of thing. Or you acquire a computer, you need to be able to access the computer. There are many different types of password crackers out there. I think we used John the Ripper in the past. Used to work, I'm not sure with the latest Windows computers. But basically, what generally happens is you essentially boot into its own operating system. So like just how you can have a live CD, a live operating system. So this is a live operating system that simply only does like one or two tasks. And those tasks are to try to get through the password. And so generally it can either figure out what the password is sometimes, or it can just eliminate the password. That's what we used to do, is we just got rid of the password. So it would go in, it would find the administrator account, it would just zero out whatever password was there for the administrator account, and then you just walk into the computer and do whatever the hell it is that you want. You can recover deleted files, again, as a form of hacking. This is something to think about. A lot of people get files, again, W-2s, all kinds of other information. They delete the file and then they think it's secure. It's not. Remember, most computers do not actually delete files, they delete pointers to files. So the data is stored on the drive, and then in order to actually delete data on the drive, that's relatively resource intensive. And so what the operating system manufacturers decided to do is that they would just delete the pointer to the file. So basically the pointer is what tells the computer not to overwrite this section of the hard drive. This section of the hard drive has files that we care about. If you're going to write something, write it anywhere but here. When you delete the pointer, the file stays there, but now the computer just will use that space if it decides to use that space. So what you can have on computers is basically you have all these files that are deleted, which means the pointers are deleted. But if somebody is not really doing a lot with their computer, maybe they're just web browsing, maybe they're playing some video games, they're not actually doing a lot of stuff with the storage. You may have files that sit there for years and years and years and years that have been deleted but have never been overwritten. And so you can use a piece of software like Recuva. We used to use Recuva back in the day. And it'll just go through. It'll scan the entire hard drive and it will pull out all of those files that were deleted. There is higher end file recovery software out there that will do multiple scans. Like the more times you scan over a hard drive, the more data the software will be able to pull out. One of the big problems you get to is that with large hard drives, this becomes a longer and longer process. So like we used to do a lot of in-depth file recovery for 250 gig or even 500 gig hard drives. Once drives started to get to a terabyte or 4 terabyte, it just takes too damn long. Run Recuva once, you get what you get. But something to realize, if you have a lot of time to try to recover data, you can actually have, like these deleted file software, many times it can run up to 10 times. So it'll scan once, then it'll scan again, they'll scan again, they'll scan time. Every time it scans, it might be able to pick up just a little bit of additional information. It's then able to fill in any blanks that it has, and at a certain point you may be able to get readable files that you would not have been able to get readable files before. One of the other interesting things nowadays with AI and machine learning, you may be able to find some of the software out there that will try to basically guess what the blanks are. So back in the day when I was using this, if you have a blank space, you have a blank space. So if you do not have enough information, you simply can't read the file. If you have software that understands what's supposed to be in those blank spaces, it may be able to do guessing, or it may know what's supposed to go there, be able to fill in information that it's not actually getting from the drive itself, to be able to give you things like usable files to think about. So that's one of the things. Future concerns. So this is what I'm interested in a lot. Again, as far as Silicon Dojo is concerned, one of the big things here is things like IoT, Internet of Things. Internet of Things is having all of these kinds of ubiquitous devices around that you're interacting with. Sometimes you're talking to them. Sometimes they're giving you visual cues. Sometimes they're giving you audio cues. Basically, you're having all this stuff happen. You're interacting with a local device. This device is interacting with servers, interacting with serverless architecture. You've got all kinds of sensors and all that kind of stuff going on. And so what becomes interesting in this modern world of computing is then we have new issues with hacking. Again, remember, hacking is simply interacting with systems in the non-traditional way of interacting with systems. So, if you want to make a Tesla vehicle speed up, well, if you can't put your foot on the gas pedal yourself, one of the things that you might be able to do is you might be able to screw with a speed limit sign so that the Tesla vehicle thinks that the speed limit is now 85 miles an hour and will speed up to 85 miles an hour. I want that car to go 85 miles an hour, but I'm not actually in the car. How can I do that? Oh, I'll change the speed limit sign. So this was done a couple of years ago. Apparently this has been fixed as far as Tesla is concerned, but there's that interesting thing. When we have computers that see, do the computers see what we see? Do the computers interpret what is seen the same way that we interpret what is seen? So what these researchers were able to do is they were able to add this nose onto a 35 mile an hour sign, right? So if I'm going down the road and I see a 35 mile an hour speed limit sign that looks like this, I'm going to think that's a little bit weird. I'm not going to call the police. I'm not going to call Public Works. I'm not going to tell anybody about it. That's a weird looking 35 mile an hour sign, right? But to me, it's still it's still fully a 35 mile an hour sign. The interesting thing though is when they added this little nose here, the Tesla vehicle started interpreting this as an 85 mile an hour sign. So I see 35 miles, so I visually cut out the nose. That's how I interpret it. The Tesla vehicles, it added the bits that weren't there, and they saw it as 85 miles an hour. Apparently, these people that were testing it, the vehicle actually did speed up at the time, and they had to put on the brake to keep it from continuing up, and so they were able to trick the Tesla vehicle. And so things to think about, like again, with these visual sensors. Can you get a computer to see something differently than how a human sees it? Again, this is, I talk about a lot of philosophical stuff on my videos. And again, a lot of people roll their eyes at me. When I talk about the thing of the name, when we talk about words, what is the actual meaning of that word? And so many times we argue about a word and both people have different definitions of what that word is, and so you get into really stupid arguments, right? I talk about this kind of stuff. And what becomes really interesting in this modern world of IoT and autonomous vehicles and how we're dealing with sensors is we really have to start thinking about how we all literally see and interpret the world, right? This is the example of how a human can see and interpret something, and a computer can see and interpret the exact same thing, but the response is entirely different. LiDAR, this is a hell of a thing. I didn't even realize this. Hacking LiDAR, changing what autonomous vehicles see. So according to Dr. Hansen, experiments using just a black trash bag appeared to be the most effective method of obfuscating an object that the LiDAR detects, which is actually there. So basically, if you ever watch my Arduino projects, one of the things I'll show you is with infrared sensors. Infrared sensors will detect anything close to them unless it's a black object. A black object actually sucks up the infrared light, so even if you're touching the infrared sensor with a black object, it doesn't matter, the infrared sensor isn't going to detect it because it gets sucked up. Apparently, this person was experimenting with LiDAR and found that when LiDAR sends out lasers, so LiDAR is basically a laser radar, it sends out lasers and then that bounces back. And so when they put a trash bag over something, that laser went out, that laser light got sucked up by the trash bag, and so as far as the computer would interpret that, that would mean that's almost an infinite distance away. So it becomes very interesting. What if you just start putting, bricks in trash bags on roads or something like that? Like what happens with that kind of thing? And this is what we need to be thinking about with sensors and how to deal with it. One of the interesting things, again, spoofing LiDAR, which is, I'm not sure how you time this, but apparently they were able to spoof LiDAR. So the idea, again, you've got this radar laser essentially, and so what the scientists were able to do is when the laser, basically they would put their own little kind of like spoofing device out here, and so when the laser hit their spoofing device, the spoofing device would detect all the information about that laser, and then it would change things so that the vehicle would get different readings back. So basically, you could have the laser signal go into this little LiDAR spoofer. The LiDAR spoofer would then just basically sync that laser signal. Then it might wait an extra millisecond to send its own laser signal back so that the car thinks an object is only a foot away, right? So with a black bag, it's either this close or it's infinite. So with the LiDAR spoofing, basically the idea was how can we screw with the LiDAR so that the LiDAR is actually receiving signals, but it's receiving inappropriate signals. Something to think about if people wanted to really screw with something, let's say road systems in the future. If everybody's using LiDAR, what happens if you put little LiDAR spoofing devices out on a road and they basically start sending the laser signals back to tell the cars that there is an object that is 5 feet in front of them? All of a sudden you could have a massive backup of everything's autonomous with nothing there, simply because these sensors are reading that something is there. Again, the difference between what a sensor sees and what reality is can be massive. GPS spoofing, this is a hell of a thing. So Russia, I don't got to talk about Russia. Russia, 10,000 times has been using GPS spoofing. First time I heard about GPS spoofing, this was kind of interesting, again, on a very large scale, is the idea of being able to position cargo ships into areas so that pirates could more efficiently attack them, right? So there's a lot of cargo ships out in the open water. They're way too far at sea for pirates to go after them. So here's the whole thing. Hey, what if we could get a cargo ship to come closer to land so it's easier to attack them? And so they actually proved that this works. Remember, GPS, right? Global Positioning System. This is simply radio signals coming in from satellites that is being read by GPS units, and then that determines where they are on the planet. So if you're able to give nefarious GPS signals, you could actually start to basically control these ships because of the GPS signals that they're getting in, right? You go to autopilot, the captain goes to autopilate, they says we want to go from point A to point B. Well, so what happens is the ship is still going to logically be going from point A to point B, but if you can start modifying the GPS signals that it's receiving, it's going to think point B is in a different direction. And so what they proved was with these large ships, with GPS spoofing, if you modify it a little bit, right, you can't modify it by miles, right? If the ship thinks it's here, and then all of a sudden it thinks it's here, then somebody knows that there's going to be a problem and it's going to get fixed. But if you're out in the open ocean, and the computer, the ship is here, but the computer thinks it's here, and then after an hour, right? And it just starts getting farther and farther. You start slowly moving the ship. You start moving the ship, 100 feet off course or whatever per hour, something like that. It's so slow, nobody's really gonna notice it. With the idea then, after a couple of days, you've then positioned the ship into the place that it's supposed to be, or the place that the pirates wanted. As far as the GPS spoofing goes, with Russia's kind of interesting here. They were doing things like screwing around so that GPS units would get an entirely false location. So basically the GPS units would read the wrong place. Again, the normal GPS spoofing. One of the interesting things Russia started doing, also kind of interesting to think about, is they were just sending out empty GPS signals. So something to consider, again, whenever hacking attacks or anything else, there's multiple ways to skin a cat. Right? So a lot of people think about jamming a signal. So you're going to jam GPS. Basically, when you jam GPS, when you jam radio signals, you put out a lot of electrical interference into the environment, and then there's so much electrical interference that the normal systems can't read things like GPS signals or whatever else. Here's the thing though, you're putting out a lot of RF interference. So anybody with the equipment or knows what's going on can detect the large amount of RF interference going out, and they can triangulate where it's coming from, and either police or a bomb can meet you at your current location. So that's one of the issues with jamming, right? When you jam, anybody who knows what's going on, it's pretty obvious to understand what's happening. What's kind of interesting here with the idea of sending out empty GPS signals is it's not nearly as obvious. Your GPS system is working. It's simply the signal that it's receiving. It has no load, has no payload, and so it's not able to determine the information that it normally would. And so think about that, right? If you're driving down the road and all of a sudden your cell phone stops working, your radio stops working, and your GPS stops working, that's the kind of thing that would happen with jamming, you're probably going to think World War III is about to start. Uh-oh, things are about to get really bad, right? On the other hand, if you're driving down the road and your GPS signal just craps out, right? Your radio's working fine, your cell phone's working fine, there's just GPS signal, just your GPS systems aren't working properly. Maybe it's a problem, right? Maybe you're in an area where the GPS signals aren't getting, maybe there's satellite, whatever else. You don't think about it quite as much. And so again, when we start talking about things like autonomous vehicles, IoT devices, this becomes an interesting attack vector of what if you can just get vehicles or whatever to stop understanding where they are in the world. Then we get to the what are you thinking? This is the part of the show where if YouTube has not canceled my channel yet, I try to prove that I'm not the evil bastard Susan W. thinks that I am. One of the big things, again, with a lot of folks out there, a lot of folks with their hats, I'm a hacker, I want to be a hacker too. One of the things, people with their hats on will say, Eli, give me liberty or give me death. That's awesome. I always love it when teenagers say stupid crap like give me liberty or give me death. You do realize that there's not only two options in that. Give me liberty, give me death, or give me other. Right? You never hear anybody say, give me liberty or give me partial usage of my brain. Nobody ever actually says that. Nobody ever says, give me liberty or give me one working appendage. You ever see real violence? Real violence is bad. There is worse than death. There is worse than death out there. And anyways, I think this is a big problem we get to in the modern world. Again, when we start talking about anonymous and we start talking about hacktivists, a lot of folks in these communities are kids who, again, they believe in hats, and they believe in give me liberty and give me death, and they believe in all the fancy sound bites that they've been spoon-fed by the Disney Channel. The issue is the real world out there is a hell of a lot nastier than that, and sometimes death isn't necessarily the worst option. I think about this with Aaron Swartz. If you know the story of Aaron Swartz, he committed suicide in 2012, I think it was. He was a cool dude. I don't know if he was a cool dude. He was useful for modern society. He helped create RSS. He helped create Reddit. He helped with a lot of the technologies that we use today, or at least the predecessors of the technologies that we now currently use. The thing was, he decided to become a hacktivist, because that was a cool thing to do. And one of the things that he did was at JSTOR. Anyways, I think it was Harvard. He went to Harvard or MIT, one of these schools, and there is a database system that contains public records, essentially public academic records. The thing is even though the material is public, right, the system itself is proprietary, and so schools, academic institutions, and all that kind of stuff have to pay to use the system. Again, I'm not getting on either side of this. I'm not. I see one side, I see the other. I'm just sitting here with my Lego blocks, telling you how it is. So anyways, he decided as a hacktivist he was going to go in there, and he was basically going to do a dump of all what was supposed to be publicly accessible records from the particular university. So he went to the university, he tried to pull the records, they tried to stop him using normal security means. He at some point found a networking closet that he was able to gain access to. He plugged his laptop directly into a switch, into the internal switch for that university, and he had this laptop just automatically going through, downloading all the documents that it possibly could. Anyways, government decided to go after him, so essentially violating, criminal laws and all that kind of thing, and he was looking at up to 30 years in prison. So you imagine a computer geek, you imagine the personalities of a hell of a lot of computer geeks, and then you imagine them facing 30 years in prison. He decided, fuck it, and he killed himself. Again, I'm not actually trying to make light of that in any fashion. It is a sad thing. Again, I think again, my one side of this is I think it was just a horrible, horrible use of our criminal justice system. Whatever the hell should have happened to this kid, 30 years in prison is just idiotic on the face of it. But the problem is this is a real thing to consider. One of the things that I will warn folks out there, if they want to become hackers, is just realize that the US government can't go after the real hackers. One of the big problems we have with a lot of the hacking that is currently happening is that it's happening outside of the United States, and because of treaties and rules and laws and a whole bunch of stuff, the reality is that the US government can't go after the people that are doing most damage to the United States. Of course, remember, these are politicians. Politicians. If they can't punish the hell out of the people that are actually creating the most amount of damage, they'll go to the next closest thing. And so one of the things that I really do worry about for a generation of hackers in the United States is as hacking becomes a bigger and bigger problem. We just had the pipeline shut down, so I'm doing this video in 2021. We just had the gas pipeline that was shut down. We've had the SolarWinds attack. We've had many other things happen where the US government is basically, they have a thumb up their butt. There's nothing they can do about that. And so what I'm really concerned about is that in order to prove that the government is doing something, we are going to get the equivalent of a war on drugs on hackers in the United States. Basically, people who we can have an argument, we can have a real argument about whether or not they should be downloading all of this information out of JSTOR. That's its own art, but where the government goes after them for 30 years to prove that they're cracking down on the hackers. So do be careful about this. And that's the whole thing. I've known a lot of people in the world. I know a lot of people doing a lot of wacky things. And that's the whole thing. Like, know what you're doing. As I always say, I'm not going to get in the middle of it for the most part. You got to do what you got to do. I've just seen a lot of young people just eat a hell of a lot of buzzwords and not really realize the full ramifications. It's all fun and games till bits of you get blown off. So anyways, be careful. Other. Liberty, death, other. Other is always an option. The other thing that I will remind people in the hacking world is I think one of the big problems that we're running into right now is so many of our politicians are so frickin' old. I don't care what side of the aisle we're talking about here, they are all old. The one thing that I'll say, the one thing that I'll throw my hat into the ring for is these people are too damn old and they gotta retire. So one of the big issues that I see is, again, we keep hearing so much stuff about Russia. Russia, 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 Russia. What many adults may not realize, because we can have 32-year-old adults that were not around for the Cold War. What a lot of adults with kids and houses and careers may not realize is that the USSR at one point was very scary. We had something called mutually assured destruction, where I have no idea why anybody is currently paranoid if they ever lived through that time period. We had a time period where the reason that the two superpowers did not attack each other is because both of the superpowers agreed they would just glass the entire planet if somebody else launched a missile. Holy hell, that was a time to be scared. Today, Al-Qaeda? Al-Qaeda? I'll take 50 Al-Qaedas over that crap. Anyways, but one of the arguments I'd say, when we start seeing Russia, Russia, Russia all the time, again, it's very interesting with Russia. You know, Russia is down to one aircraft carrier. They have one aircraft carrier that is 30 years old. They were trying to retrofit their own aircraft carrier. The floating dry dock for their aircraft carrier had some kind of catastrophic failure, sank in the blink of an eye, and put a gouge into their final aircraft carrier. Oh, some big ass thing when one of the cranes hit it. Again, I'm not saying we should attack Russia. I am not saying that Russia is somehow incapable of defending themselves or doesn't have any kind of military presence. I'm just saying, as an American, I've got 99 problems. Russia's not one. But what I would argue is when Speaker Pelosi, one thing I will say about Pelosi is she needs to be advertising plastic surgery. Whoever is doing her plastic surgery is doing magic. I had no idea she was 81 years old. Go take a look at Pelosi, and whatever you feel about her politics, just be amazed by that face. She is 81 years old. Biden is 78 years old. Sanders is 78 years old. Schumer is 70 years old. He's the youngin'. 70 is the young of the group. McConnell is 79 years old, and everybody's favorite Trump is 75 years old. These are the upper echelons of our current political establishment, and they are old. They are so old. The reason that they're screaming about Russia is because, you know, the USSR was very important when they were my age. Anyways, one of the things you have to realize about criminal justice and law enforcement is that it's politics. Again, the drug war is politics, right? So much of this crap, defunding police, is politics. All of this stuff is politics, and there's prioritization. What laws? The government has so many laws, they literally cannot enforce all the laws that they have. Impossible to enforce all the laws that they have. And so one of the things is all governments have to figure out what law enforcement that they are going to prioritize and what law enforcement that they're going to let slide. So again, right now with the whole idea with legalizing or at least decriminalizing drugs, in a lot of places, especially like with marijuana, it is not that marijuana is legal. It's not. It is completely illegal. But the politicians have realized it's not really worth the money to go after people that are smoking marijuana. There's probably bigger issues right now. And so they've deprioritized going after marijuana and prioritized going after other things. One of the things I get very concerned about for this generation of hackers, and especially the next generation of hackers, is that we've had a whole bunch of really freaking old people running the government for a long time now and prioritizing based off of what they thought was important when they were 40 years old. And so the question happens is when these people finally, when are you gonna retire? I'm not going to politics. She's 81. When is she gonna retire? When these people retire, do you think that they're going to retire and you're gonna get a 75-year-old and a 72-year-old and a 72-year-old and a 65-year-old and a 75-year-old and a 70-year-old? Do you think when they retire, they're going to be replaced by people that are similar in their age? Or do you think that they're going to be replaced by a 50-year-old and a 60-year-old and a 45-year-old and a 50-year-old, so on and so forth? People of my generation. My generation, we understand how important technology is. In my generation, I consider it just as much a crime to go after a small business's PayPal account as it is to go in and actually shoplift out of the small business. And so what happens when the prioritization of criminal justice changes, and are a lot of hackers who basically thought that this is some kind of weird ass game are all of a sudden going to go to prison? Again, you think about it with the drug war. So, something to be thinking about and how the generations change. The final slide of all this is, why do you want to be a hacker? Again, one of the things I find with a lot of young people nowadays, a lot of people have angst, and they have anger, they have aggression, and they want to get it out. When I was young, we literally beat the crap out of each other. We would be black and blue. Like literally hobbling through the high school halls for like a week. That proved how hard you went, right? Anyways, there's a lot of folks out there that for some reason they feel like hacking is something that is going to be good for their ego, and this is what's going to pump them up. I get concerned about it. Again, remember, tech is just code and configuration files. A lot of people somehow feel like hackers are superior to other technology professionals. Why? It's just code. It's just systems. I can set up a system to sniff all the network traffic and get paid by the company in order to do it, or you can shove in some little Raspberry Pi to sniff the network traffic and do it for criminal reasons. It's still devices, it's still configuration files, it's still doing stuff, right? One of the big questions is, do you want to build bridges or burn them? And for all the assholes out there, that's all you are doing. You are taking a sledgehammer to somebody's car window and then expecting a goddamn pat on the back because you think you're so fucking special. Sorry, I have some opinions about this. But this is something that you have to be thinking about. Again, in the modern world, this is where I look with hacktivists, when I look at a lot of the activism going on, right? We need solutions. Again, I mean, it sounds like people think it's a joke for some gosh darn reason, but free to the end user hands-on technology education, right? We know that the people in our society are not getting the education that they need. We know that education is too darn expensive in the modern world, and so I'm trying I'm trying to build Silicon Dojo to provide a service. Again, we know that there's problems with access to internet service, right? We know that if you go out and you build mesh networks, citywide mesh networks, you can provide internet service to disadvantaged people that need it. You know, again, there's so many things that you can do with software and that you can do with technology that will make the world a better place. Are you going to make the world a better place, or are you going to pick up a sledgehammer and put it through somebody's car window? Again, the one politic thing I will scream about in this video, I try to keep the topical crap out of these things, but I see this with the what are they called? Antifa, right? You got all these people that are picking up Molotov cocktails and they're screaming at police officers and they're throwing rocks and they're burning crap to the ground. How does that educate a disadvantaged kid in the inner city? How many of these people, instead of picking up a damn Molotov cocktail and acting like an asshole for a couple of months, what if you actually went into an inner city and you actually tried to provide adequate early childhood education to the folks that can't afford better? One of these things is going to improve society. One of these things is assholes being assholes. So that's one of the big things I will say with hacking. There is a value to penetration testing. Do not get me wrong. There is a real value for penetration testing, but just like everything in the world, does everybody need to be a damn penetration tester? Again, as an administrator, I've done a hell of a lot of hacking. People can't remember their passwords for the life of them. I've made so much money off of restoring passwords. It's ridiculous. Right? I mean, that's a real thing. There are real values to these skills. What I see with most people out there is most people have egos that are this big and they want to prove something to the world by breaking windows. Again, kicking a door, home's door in, is penetration testing. Hey, look, I kicked your door in. Yeah, I guess you should have a better door. Right, if you go out there and you're going to vandalize somebody's website, you're going to do something else, just imagine somebody breaking your freaking door in and then screaming at the top of your lungs, "Ha! I guess your door sucks! You should buy another one!" Right? That would not be appropriate, now would it? No. Again, are you hacking or are you just being an ass? One of the big things, and this is what I tell all the kids out there, right? Penetration testing is a real thing. A real thing. That's the thing, nobody wants to do the hard work. All right, for some reason, hacking and penetration testing, it's kind of like the hard drive swapping of the kids. It's like, yeah, I'm gonna be cool, I'm gonna be a penetration tester. Here's the thing, again, penetration testing is a real thing. Hacking is a real thing. But what do you have to do, right, for real penetration testing? You must know not just how to infiltrate systems, but also know enough to understand how not to destroy the systems that you're trying to infiltrate. What? Well, that's not my responsibility, Eli. Eli, I was able to do a Sql injection attack. It's not my responsibility what happened to the database. It's not my responsibility how many people got laid off because the company went out of business because the database got shredded. I was a good guy because I said I'm a good guy. All right, again, this is an important thing. Again, SQL injection. Hopefully you can't do SQL injection attacks anymore. But anyways, with SQL injection attack, right? The whole idea is, let's say you're trying to add data into a database. You go to a web app, you decide you're trying to add data into the database. Well, here's the thing, right? So if the SQL injection attack works, most likely means it was not coded properly. And with the not being coded properly, one of the problems you might run into is that the database, the fields, aren't using the right data types. So whenever you deal with programming, whenever you deal with databases, there are data types. An int is a number without a decimal point. 1, 2, 10, 102 is an int. A float is a number with a decimal point. 20.11, 11.22, whatever else. Text is text. Hello, my name is Bob. There's all kinds of different data types. So, Smarty Pants is able to do a SQL injection attack into a database. And let's say it's some kind of ordering database, right? Orders. And so in the column, where that's only supposed to have numbers, so let's say prices. The person is so cool and they're so smart, they are able to insert into that database column Bob. So now you have all these reports, you have everything that is based off of the number values in this particular price column. People go to do the reports, and all of a sudden, the system that has been set up to count 11 plus 20.22 plus 50.11 plus 5.5 plus Bob plus 20 plus 60.11, right? All of a sudden, those calculations start failing. And again, depending on how that system was built, that may be a simple report, just brings back a failure. Or again, when sometimes when you're looking at dashboards or whatever, you have a lot of information being pulled from a lot of different places. Maybe you have more information than the person even needs. But if one thing fails, that may fail out the entire dashboard. So if you're able to put Bob into the price column in this particular database, there may be a hell of a lot of issues there. But hey, you're a good guy, aren't you? You're one of the good ones. Yeah. Anyways, penetration testers. The biggest thing about being a real penetration tester is you have to understand the technology to the degree that you really understand what you're doing. You can sit there and you can go, oh my God, I put Bob into the specific column. I need to go to the database and go through and undo what I just did. Everything will be back up again in 10 minutes. If you cannot do that, don't do it. Off my soapbox. Sorry. I don't know. The wannabe hackers nowadays, they really do just irritate me. What's the difference between a real hacker and a wannabe hacker? I think that line right there, that line, if you really understand what the hell's going on, that's the difference. So anyways, this was a basic class on hacking introduction. again, it gives you a good idea of what's going on with spoofing and sniffing and man-in-the-middle attacks and all that kind of different stuff. Again, if you're going to be doing hacking, white hat hacking or whatever else, make sure that you have the legal authority to do that. And again, make sure that you've actually checked off all the boxes to verify they have the legal authority. I think about this with nowadays, again, where somebody may have their code on somebody else's platform. So let's say you're trying to do load testing or penetration testing or something on somebody's web app that's sitting on GoDaddy, right? They may give you permission to beat the hell out of their app. But if GoDaddy hasn't given you the permission, you may be putting yourself into legal liability from GoDaddy. Again, GoDaddy's gotten better over the years. They used to be a disaster for their shared hosting plans. They would put so many websites onto one box that the entire box slowed down. It was entirely insane. But again, one of the things that they could say is, well, we expect a normal load for the websites on our servers that the physical resources will be able to handle that. Right? If you don't like it, go to somebody else. Well, something interesting, if you start hammering the hell, let's say you start doing a denial of service attack against that particular website, if that website is sitting on a shared hosting box or some kind of other shared platform, you may not simply be attacking or deteriorating the viability of that particular site or app. You may be harming everything else on that box or on that platform. So again, you were given approval by the company that wants you to do the penetration testing, but depending on what you're doing though, GoDaddy or somebody else may come after you, so do be very careful about that. Again, also make sure whenever you're interacting with somebody that you're going to do something like penetration testing, that they have the legal authority to allow you to do whatever you're doing. You have a new buddy who has become an administrator for a medium-sized company or area, and he says, hey buddy, I've heard you've been playing around with penetration testing. Why don't you come in and see what you can do on our network? That administrator may not have the legal authority to tell you to do that, right? If the CEO hasn't signed off or the CTO or whatever else hasn't signed off, you may be violating the law because you are illegally trying to compromise systems that you do not have a legal right to go after. So do be very, 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 very careful with that. And yeah, so that's about it. I think the next class I'm going to do is Introduction to Cybersecurity, and I'm going to go back to doing coding. This whole syntax and text thing with Azure Cognitive Services, absolutely sexy. Oh, that's so sexy. I think that's cool. So anyways, that was the class for today. If you like what I do remember that the education that I provide here at Silicon Dojo and these videos, basically this is funded through crowdfunding at this point. Again, I want free to the end user technology education, but free to the end user doesn't mean free. This still costs money, that costs money, this costs money. There's a whole lot of money that has to get spent for people to get free education. So if you do want to support what I'm doing, there's a link down below or somewhere around for crowdfunding for DonorBox. If you can click on that link, and if you'd be so nice to throw in $1 or $2 every month, I will accept one-time payments. I'll accept any money. I'll accept anything you want to give me. But if you want to do like a reoccurring payment, that makes it a lot easier for me to try to do budgeting or whatever else. Again, simply $1, $2, whatever you think is valuable. That would be ever so nice. And with that, as always, I enjoyed teaching this class, and I hope to see you soon here in Asheville, North Carolina.